Merrimack TV is committed to our community. From gavel-to-gavel coverage of town and school board meetings to updates on town services and projects, we aim to keep you connected.
Good morning, I'm Kyle Fox, Public Works Director for the town of Merrimack.
Hi, I'm Diane Trippett. I'm the town clerk tax collector for the town of Merrimack.
I'm Captain Matt Tarleton with the Merrimack, New Hampshire Police Department.
And keep the public informed of every motion.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
And many moments, so you can be confident that we're here for you. Thanks for watching. Stay connected. Follow Merrimack TV on Facebook.
You are, Bob.
Okay. Let me call to order the meeting of the Merrimack Planning Board for Tuesday, July 21st, 2020. As chair of the Merrimack Planning Board, due to the COVID-19 crisis and in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-4, this is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing either of the following phone numbers: 1-312-626-6799 or 1-929-205-6099, and meeting identification number 949-4626-0236. The meeting may also be viewed on Merrimack TV Channel 20 on Comcast or Merrimack TV Facebook Live page, www.facebook.com/Merrimack TV. B, by providing notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of how to access the meeting using Zoom, and instructions are provided in the meeting agenda posted on the Town of Merrimack's website at www.merrimacknh.gov/planning-board. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem, please email T. Thompson, TTHOMPSON, @merrimacknh.gov. Adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Okay, so let's go through the attendance. Alistair, you're first.
I'm present, Mr. Chairman, and I'm in my little study room, and there is nobody else in the room with me.
Paul McLaughlin.
I am present. I'm at my own house, and I am alone, yes.
Lynn Christensen.
I'm present. I'm in my barn with nobody else with me, but I am going to have to log off and log back on. So if Nick can do that, I occasionally have to do that with my Zoom meetings.
Okay. We'll have to monitor as that happens, because while you're logged off, we won't have a quorum. So I'll have to keep an eye on that. Are there any other board members present on the Zoom call other than myself? Hearing none. Robert Best, Chairman, I am here. Obviously, I am by myself in my office in Concord. And that completes the attendance. There are 4 members present, and that is a quorum. Let's see, taking a look at our agenda. We have no alternate members to appoint into voting positions, and we are at the Planning and Zoning Administrator's report. Tim.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, in your packet, you should have a memo dated July 15th.
for regional impact determinations for two of the items on tonight's agenda, the Linda Raymond subdivision and the Christopher Ross request for a waiver of full site plan review, as well as the Governor's Hill Corporation lot line adjustment. Staff recommends that all three of these projects are not of regional impact as they do not meet the criteria that this board has established previously.
What's the will of the board with respect to the staff's recommendation about regional impact?
This is Alistair Milnes, and Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the recommendation from Mr. Tim Thompson that all projects listed on his memo of July 15, 2020 are not of regional impact.
Is there a second? Second by Lynn Christensen. All votes need to be roll call votes, and so with that, Alistair Milnes?
Yes.
Lynn Christensen?
Aye.
Paul McLaughlin?
Aye.
I also vote aye. That is 4-0-0. To support the staff's recommendation. Anything else under the Planning and Zoning Administrator's report, Tim?
Not under this part of the agenda, but we'll talk a little bit more when we get to other items of concern after the bulk of the agenda is completed.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Are there any questions by members of the board for the Planning and Zoning Administrators and staff?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All set. Okay. Then as we turn to our agenda, in our introduction, I forgot to remind everybody, but I'll probably continue to do it throughout, to remember that the applicants and speaking members of the public should clearly identify themselves when they begin to speak for the record with both their name and their address to provide that information. And that way everybody at home will be able to hear and know who you are as well.
One thing I would add to that, Mr. Chairman, is that when we are on an item that a member of the public wishes to comment on, please press *9 on your phone. That will indicate that you're raising your hand and wishing to speak.
Excellent. Thank you for that reminder, Tim. So *9 if you're on the phone and you'd like to speak. With that, we are up to our annual meeting of the Planning Board, which is the occasion where we elect our officers and review our rules of procedures. Our board has two officers, a chair and a vice chair. And then we have our rules of procedure, and my notes indicate the staff is not recommending any changes to our rules of procedure, but the board could take that up. So the first business that the board should take up is nominations for chair and vice chair. I open the floor.
I will make a motion that we, as long as they are willing, Bob Best to continue as chair and Alistair Milnes as to continue as vice chair.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second that motion, Chairman.
So that's a motion by Lynn Christensen, second by Paul McLaughlin to nominate myself, Bob Best, as chair and Alistair Milnes as vice chair. Are there any other nominees by the board? If there are none, then all in favor of the nominations. Let's see, we got to do a roll call. I keep forgetting my rules. Lynn, how do you vote?
Aye.
Alistair, how do you vote?
Aye.
Paul, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. 4-0-0 to elect the officers as we've outlined. Does any member of the board have any recommended changes to our rules of procedure for the board to consider this year?
Mr. Chairman, this is Alistair Milnes. I have no changes that I see the rules require.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I also didn't see any, and I don't hear any from our other members in attendance, nor have any been communicated to me by other members of the Board of the Public. So with that in mind, we
recommend changes. It's because of some changes to state law, and going over the last legislative session, there did not appear to be anything that staff could ascertain would be impactful to the rules of procedure this year.
Thank you for that, Tim. Thank you for that as well. Okay, if there are no changes that the board wishes to take up to a rules of procedure, then that concludes the annual meeting of the organizational meeting of the board. And we are ready to move on to the next agenda item, which is number 4, the Granger Revocable Trust as the applicant and owner. And this is on our agenda for continued review for acceptance and consideration of final approval for a 2-lot subdivision. The parcel is located at 225 Natticook Road in the R4 Residential by Soils District. Aquifer Conservation and Wellhead Protection Area, Tax Map 2B, Lot 34, case number PB 2020-11. It is continued from our June 16th meeting, and I have in my notes that the applicant requests further continuance of this matter following a brief presentation by the applicant.
That was the case up until about 2:30 this afternoon when we received an email from Mr. Thomas Carr from Meridian Land Services, which I'll read into the record. It says, "Good afternoon. Please consider this a formal request to table and continue the Granger Revocable Trust subdivision to the August regular planning board meeting. We are currently working with the Nashua Sewer Department in an effort to achieve one sewer hookup for the remainder of the lot being subdivided. Thank you, Tom Carr from Meridian." The staff would recommend that if the board is accepting of that, we continue to the August 18th meeting.
What's the will of the board with respect to the request to continue to the August 18th meeting?
Mr. Chairman, this is Alistair Moons. I make a recommendation that we accept the request of the applicant to continue to the August meeting with no further notice to abutters.
Is there a second for Alistair's motion?
I'll second.
Lynn Christensen has a second for that motion. Let's go through the roll call. Lynn, how do you vote?
Aye.
Alistair, how do you vote?
Aye.
Paul, how do you vote?
Aye.
I also vote aye. 4-0-0 for the continuance on the agenda item number 4. That brings us to agenda item number 5, which is John Andrick as the applicant and owner the review of a home occupation to permit a firearms sales and repair business. The parcel is located at 62 Belmont Drive in the R4 Residential by Soils District, Tax Map 6D, Lot 278, Case Planning Board 2020-12. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You'll have in your packet a memo from Robert Best, the Planning and Zoning Administrator, dating the board and the recommendations for this particular proposal. This is a business that currently exists at the property at 62 Belmont Drive. Was done by an administrative approval back in 2017 because the business at that time did not propose to have any customers visiting the site. Mr. Andrick is now desirous of expanding that to allow for visitors to visit the site, and under the zoning ordinance, that therefore requires by the planning board in order for that to take place. Robert summarized the application and has a few recommended conditions of approval should the board move forward with this application tonight.
Thank you for that, Tim. And let me make a few comments about public testimony and involvement. We've got a couple of correspondences that we'll read into the record at the appropriate time, offering the board some opinions about what various abutters wish to see happen. I have several printed, one also by electronically that was received a little later in the process. We'll do that. And then for all of the folks on the phone, you'll have your opportunity to weigh in during the public hearing. Remember, it is *9 when we get to the public hearing to raise your hand for that. Tim.
One thing I did wish to mention that Robert did follow up with the police department this afternoon to verify, and he did verify with the police that they do not have any particular issue with the application as is being presented here tonight.
Thank you for that, Tim. Also, at the request of the board, a couple of other past applications for similar occupations have been distributed to board members so that everyone could have a review of potential precedents and other ways that we've approached these in the past. With that lengthy introduction, Mr. Andrick, are you ready to make a presentation about your home occupation business?
Sure. So all I'm really looking to do is, as was said, have people arrive at the business. Right now I have a federal firearms dealer license. I would like to apply for a manufacturer's license. And the reason I want to do that is in many cases, people want customizations of firearms, and the regulations regarding what is a repair and what is an improvement, what is considered to be replacement of existing parts and what is considered to be manufacturing. The federal regulations are a little bit unclear and always subject to interpretation. So I have an ATF agent that kind of oversees my operation, And he said that the simplest thing to do is just get the manufacturer's license, and then every time you make any modification to a firearm, document it, file a yearly report at the end. If we don't need it, then we throw it away. But if we do need it, then you're covered. So that's how this all started. And of course, I need police and planning department approval to get the alternate.
Thank you for that, Mr. Andrick. I have a handful of questions for you. Some I want to ask you just to elicit some information that you can share with the public about how federal firearms licenses are handled and some of the process that you've been through, given that you have one and your business exists. And then I have some questions just to fill out some details of your application where some of the answers just could use a little bit more clarity. So how long have you had your current federal firearms dealer's license?
I want to say just over 2 years.
What did you have to go through in order to get that?
You start with an application to the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They will check with I have to copy the police department, and I think I copied the planning board on pretty much everything I did. They solicit approval from the police department and the planning board before they issue the license. And then the ATF person comes to, in my case, my house, looked over my operation, how I plan to do things, store firearms, things like that. Filled out some approvals, and a couple of weeks later, I got it.
Okay. So they did a background check with you with the police department's approval, and then they come and inspect your place?
Correct.
What do they look at when they come inspect your place?
He basically looked at where I was going to store stuff, my gun safe. He had recommended, and I've noticed in your recommendations, you want a security system. I had already had that installed, as well as surveillance cameras. He was pretty happy with it. He wasn't here very long.
Okay, I understand. So looking at your application, you've indicated the number of employees proposed are 2 people who live in your home. I assume that's you and someone else.
My son.
And then no non-resident employees come to the site?
No.
Okay. Part of the reason why we need to know that is to understand just a little bit about how your driveway is laid out to make sure that any customers aren't blocking the road or parking somewhere else other than in your driveway.
Of course.
So you're doing firearm sales and repair, but you've already got the dealer's license. So you've been doing sales before this?
Primarily, yeah, internet sales, dealer-to-dealer transactions, because I never had the approval to do personal people.
Okay.
So primarily dealer-to-dealer interstate transactions, which always require federal firearm.
So having gone through that process, tell me for the public's benefit a little bit about how that happens. If someone's doing a dealer-to-dealer transfer, what does that mean?
The federal law requires that any firearm that's transferred across the state line has to be handled dealer to dealer. So if I'm going to send a firearm away or sell it or whatever, I have to get let's say I'm going to sell a firearm to somebody in Massachusetts. I have to have them get a dealer in Massachusetts, and that dealer sends me their federal license, a copy of their license. Then I can ship to that dealer. And it's the responsibility of the receiving dealer to do the background check on the eventual buyer and all that.
So is that a firearm that you owned or you purchased that you would sell, or would you sell it for a customer, or how would that work?
Most of them are firearms that I've bought on the internet. I bought auction sites, Gun Broker, and places like things like that.
Did you ever have occasion where some dealer in another state contacts you in order to receive a firearm to distribute to someone that's a purchaser here in New Hampshire?
Yes.
It works the same way in reverse?
It would. I haven't done it. I think I did it once because I forgot that I wasn't supposed to have customers here. Yeah, it would work the same way. If a buyer would ask me or contact me, and I would say, all right, well, get a firearms licensee to send me his license, and I would send him my license, and then they would ship the gun to me.
And then before you turned it over to the person who's the buyer, did you collect any information about that person?
There's a form that would have to be filled out, and you have to do a background check.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you would do the background check on the person since they're here?
Pardon me?
So if there was somebody shipping a gun to you to give to a customer, you would run the background check on the customer?
That's correct.
Okay. And what kind of background check was done?
It's a call. It's either the state police, the New Hampshire State Police, or the FBI, depending on the type of firearm. They take all the information about the person, name, address, birthplace, social security number, and come back with a yes, you can proceed with the transaction, or no, you can't proceed.
How long does that take?
Lately, it's been taking a while. I believe there's a lot of guns being sold these days. Typically, I can expect an answer back from the FBI in about 10 or 20 seconds. From the state police, maybe 20 or 30 minutes.
Okay, and then lately it's been taking longer, so it's taking still same day or multiple days, or?
I don't know. I think it's taking a long time, like a day. Okay. I purchased. My son's friend purchased a gun, and it took a day and a half to get his approval. All
right. Sounds good. So on the storage, the space for storage, you wrote on your application minimal, and you're going to store them in a gun safe. In general terms, tell us the capacity of your gun safe and where it's located, and is it something you've manufactured yourself, or was that purchased?
No, it's commercially bought. It's located in my basement. It probably measures, I want to say 2 or 3 feet deep and maybe 4 feet wide. It probably can hold, well, it depends on the type of guns, probably can hold, 15 or 20 guns.
Okay. Is it affixed to the building, or?
It's bolted to the floor.
Okay. And obviously large enough to be not particularly portable.
No, it's about 500 pounds.
How many customers, clients do you expect will visit the property each day? You said less than one. That's just based on the frequency of your sales that it's,
Well, it's hard to say, but, I work a full-time job in Nashua every day, so it would just be an evening thing, and it's more of a hobby than anything else.
Okay. And then you mentioned your hours are Monday through Saturday, 6 to 8 p.m. And I just wanted to clarify that that's 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. So just Correct. A couple of hours in the evening each day.
Correct.
Right. On the Saturdays, is there the potential for there to be anything earlier in the day? The only reason that I'm being particular about it is I want to make sure that you have shared with us what your intentions are, just so we don't have anyone saying that you're not doing what you promised or what you indicated you do. If somebody, came at 2 o'clock on a Saturday or something like that.
I would be happy to change the hours. If I want to change my hours, I have to notify the federal government anyways. I could certainly copy you or ask for that permission. And typically my thing is it's going to be an evening thing to me.
Okay.
I work during the day, like I said, down in Nashua, and I'm a pilot, and I often fly on the weekends.
Even on Saturday, you're talking 6 to 8.
Yeah. I'd be happy to say no guns on Saturday if it's a sticking point. Doesn't really matter to me.
No, it's not a sticking point to me. I just want to be clear that we know what you're going to do in your application, because if you say 6 to 8 p.m. and then for whatever reason on one particular occasion you have somebody come at 2, you offer the opportunity for someone who's a neighbor who's objecting to your business to allege that you've violated what you've committed to, and the town ought to do something about it.
Well, if I wanted to change my hours, I assume I'd have to come back before you, or can it be done administratively?
I would interject, Mr. Chairman, that given the fact that it's a firearms business and following the court case that we had with a similar application, all firearms related home occupations in the proposed zoning ordinance amendments that we're going to be bringing forth to you when we start resuming regular meetings would require all firearms related home occupations to be planning board.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah. But it sounds like you've committed to these hours with the ATF anyway, and you'd have to change it with them too. So these are going to be your hours, and you're sticking to them.
That's true.
No sign for the business. Under number 12, the square footage for your home area, you put de minimis, but they actually need an estimate or some sense of how many square feet in order to make sure it fits within the requirements of the size, and also to know about parking and those kinds of things. Actually, probably parking doesn't matter for this, but do you have one room in your home, or part of your basement, or 150 square something?
This is going to be basically on my kitchen table. what it's going to be. If the gun isn't being stored in my safe, it's going to be on my kitchen table, and I'm going to be working on it or transferring it or whatever.
Tim, how precise do you need him to be, or what can we do to give you what you need to be able to do your work?
I think his testimony in the record here is sufficient to demonstrate that he's well less than the 25% required by the ordinance.
Okay, as long as you're satisfied, I'm satisfied with that particular question. There are no outbuildings being used, no home cooking or daycare centers. Did all the address labels. Okay, so when we typically have a discussion with folks about firearms businesses, and in the time that I've been on the planning board, I'm thinking you might be the 6th time we've considered such a thing. We always ask folks about their storage of their firearms. You talked about your safe already. You talked about a security alarm. That's usually one of the requirements that we put out there. You mentioned video cameras. Where are your video cameras and what do they show?
They're on every corner of the house. They show every outside wall of the house and all the entrances.
Okay, and are they recorded into some device that saves an amount of the recording?
Yes, they are.
How much recording is saved?
The cameras are triggered by motion. They don't record unless it sees motion, so it's dependent on how much motion there is. Typically, I get 2 to 3 weeks of recording time.
Okay. So if you discovered some criminal activity at your house, something was broken into and stolen, whether it was one of the firearms or some personal stuff, you would have that video for at least a couple of weeks and then be able to preserve it for law enforcement purposes.
Yep, that's true.
Okay, so storage of any cleaning chemicals, solvents, oils, those sorts of things, disposing of rags. Generally speaking, we look to see those things stored in a fireproof cabinet or something like that. If there's any significant amount of those chemicals available, do you have any of that? Do you use any of that?
I do not. Okay. I'll be transferring guns, and the only manufacturing I'll be doing will be replacing items on a firearm with commercially available substitutes.
Okay. Do you sell ammunition or reload ammunition?
Nope.
Is that within the license type that you've applied for with the FFL?
Actually, you don't need a license to sell ammunition in the state.
Okay. But you're not going to do it anyway?
I'm not.
Probably because it's hard to beat Dick's and Walmart's prices and all of that.
Well, that's true.
Okay, so we're not doing that. Let's see. If you don't have any solvents and things, we don't have to worry about rags or things going down the drain or anything like that. I'm looking at a photograph of your driveway with at least 4 cars in it, and it looks like you could fit 20 more cars in there pretty easily. So it looks like there's not really a question about parking. Are there outdoor lights by your driveway or your parking lot? If people are going to come 6 to 8 p.m. in the wintertime will be dark.
Yes, there are. Each one of my entry doors has a light on it, and there's a pole light in the front yard.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think that I've run down the questions that are on the front of my mind, but I may think of some more if there's conversation from other members of the board or while we solicit some public testimony. Lynn or Paul or Alistair, do you have any questions for the applicant on this?
Mr. Chairman, this is Alistair Milne. You haven't actually read into the record this letter from Mr. and Mrs. LeBlanc. Are you going to do that? Because I have a comment on that letter. Otherwise, I have no other comment.
We'll do that during the public testimony section. And also, I'm not sure if Alistair, if that was you or somebody else, the paper shuffling was all over the computer and kind of covered up half of what you were saying. So if anybody's got papers that they're shuffling, just be careful with them, so that we can make sure that we can hear. All of the letters that were received by the various, from all of the various neighbors will be read during the public testimony section. Although as I read through them, if there's any part of those that are disconnected from the subject matter before us, I'll be careful to, the letter will certainly be in the record, but not necessarily read out loud certain parts of it if there's things that are unrelated to what the businesses that are before us.
Just to note, Chairman, that Councilor Boyd has arrived and is now in the meeting as well.
Oh, hey, Bill, how are you? Now we have 5. Let me write that down so I can remember to ask for your votes when we get to voting on things. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for the applicant?
Go ahead, Bill.
Seeing none. What's that?
Bill.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Bill.
thank you, and I apologize for my tardiness. To you, have you discussed calibration with Mr. Andrick by any chance?
In what way? I don't think that I have, but what were you thinking of?
Okay, so generally, when you do any type of gunsmithing, one of the requirements, at least my understanding, has always been that the gun needs to be calibrated, then it's cleaned and it's repaired, and then there has to be another step where they calibrate the gun again to make sure that it's functioning correctly. Is Mr. Andrick going to be calibrating on his premises, or will he be directing his clients to a suitable location where they can calibrate the weapon and if need be, bring it back for further service?
Thank you for that, Bill. I did not ask about that. Mr. Andrick, do you guys test or sight any of the weapons on premise or anywhere else?
So as I said before, my plan is not to do any actual machine work or anything like that to a firearm. I will only be replacing items on the firearm with commercially available substitutes that have already been tested with that firearm. So under those circumstances, I'm not sure anything like that is required.
Okay. In any case, even if it were not going to happen on site, I assume?
No, I'm not equipped for that kind of thing.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, Bill, and for the answer, Mr. Andrick. Okay. So if you're on the phone and you wish to weigh in on this application, this is the point where you would hit *9, and that will raise your hand, and then we'll be able to identify you. And once we do identify you, you'll have to begin by introducing yourself by name and address, and then you'll have a chance to tell the board whatever you think about the application. Are there any members of the public on the phone who wish to weigh in? Nick, I don't know if I'm missing something, but I'm not seeing any indication that people have raised their hand.
I have not seen anyone press *9 to be recognized.
Okay, so while we're giving people a chance to do that, if anybody does want to do that, let's take a look at the couple of correspondences that we have. I've got one dated July 14th, 2020. It is written by Michael and Jennifer LeBlanc, who are residents residing at 64 Belmont Drive in Merrimack. And it says, this is to Town of Merrimack Community Development Department in reference to John Andrick. We are the neighbors of Mr. John Andrick, who resides at 62 Belmont Drive. We understand that Mr. Andrick has applied to expand his firearms and sales business to allow customers to come to his home. After receiving notice via certified letter, we have several concerns. Belmont Drive is a very residential neighborhood that is well traveled already. We feel bringing customers into his home will now bring more traffic, noise, and possibly the wrong crowd to our family neighborhood. It says that Mr. Andrick has a very loud and busy residence with constant construction and repair of vehicles. This may be one of those that isn't related to things that are before the planning board today, but it's a discussion of other activity on the property. We have also witnessed, this is another one, some assertions that are unrelated to what the board has before it today. These are the kinds of things I'll certainly allow for the record that if the applicant, the letter writer has these concerns, those should be addressed to the proper authorities, but they're not matters that the planning board undertakes. Mr. Andrick, it says, Mr. Andrick does not seem to have any regard for his neighbors. We already don't feel safe with the house directly across the street from us due to constant police activity and watching arrests on a regular basis. I don't know that they're talking about your house because they seem to be next door to it, but maybe they are. We believe that adding this type of business in the area is not in the best interest of our neighborhood. We moved to the neighborhood 2 years ago and were not informed of this business. We understand everyone has the right to have a business out of their home and have an income. However, the nature of this business is unsettling. We are a family with 3 small children who do play outside. If we had known this business was here, we would have not purchased this home. No family envisions raising their children next to a firearms business or even sending their child to a daycare next to one for that matter. The type of business, in our opinion, is best run in a rented space within a commercial area instead of Mr. Andrick allowing random individuals to his home and to our neighborhood. In conclusion, we understand that he has an established business and that we are not in favor of him having, and with the addition of customers frequenting his home, we are opposed to it. That's the conclusion of that letter. The second is an email that is from James and Beverly. I'm going to pronounce their name wrong, although I'm going to try my best. Zisilis. And it says, my name is James Zisilis, and I have lived at 61 Belmont Drive with my wife, Beverly Zisilis, for over 30 years. We are contacting the planning board concerning a public hearing on Tuesday, July 21st, 2020, in regard to Mr. John Andrick's application, review of a home occupation to permit a firearms sales and repair business to a parcel located at 62 Belmont Drive in the R4 Residential by Soils District. Tax map 6D, lot 278, case planning board 2020-12. We have known John Andrick since shortly after he moved into his home at 62 Belmont Drive, and we are pleased to have him as a nice, friendly neighbor and wish him the best of luck with his new plans and permit requests. Thank you, James and Beverly Zislis, 61 Belmont Drive. The third email that I have here is from Ronald Smith. And Ronald Smith says, submitted on Tuesday, July 14th, 2020. What does this comment regard? Planning board, please include any questions or comments. Hello, regarding the application for John Andrick's permit, firearm sales and repair business, 62 Belmont Drive, case planning board 2020. John is a great neighbor, takes very good care of his property, very friendly and helpful. I, Ronald and Lucy Smith of 60 Belmont Drive, have no concerns of John using his property for firearm sales, and that's from Ronald Smith of 60 Belmont Drive. Those are the printed ones I have. Let me see if I can find the one that I was forwarded to me by staff that came in a little bit later. Let's see. This is an email from Irene Donnelly, who lives at 15 Matthew Drive. It's an email sent to the planning board, to the community development department on Monday, July 20th at 10:38 in the morning. I'm very strongly opposed to have John Andrick's permit to sell and repair firearms on the premises. The location is not a commercial business area and is densely populated. I am very concerned about buyers entering and leaving with firearms. Further, I, my daughter, and a neighbor heard a single gunshot recently. There are several children in the area, and I'm sure there are at least some children exploring the woods. There is a very widespread area of trees behind the property as well. In closing, this could set a precedent for other businesses to establish businesses in a residential area. And then it's signed Irene Donnelly at 15 Matthew Drive. Those are the correspondences that I have received. Tim, are there any others?
None that I'm aware of, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Nick, are there any members on the phone who have raised their hand indicating they want to speak? Okay, seeing none, then we'll close the public hearing. And Alistair, you wished to comment on some of the correspondences, or one or more of the correspondences that were received?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's Alistair Milnes here. The only thing I was worried about is, if you refer to the first letter you read, is mention of loud race cars and the rest of it. And I was a little sort of surprised, are we running a gun shop, or are we running a NASCAR garage? And I was just wondering what, since nobody else mentioned it, I was just wanted to understand what was going on.
I'm not sure the applicant has even seen such a letter since it was sent to the department, but there are certain parts of that letter that allege other activities on the property that I did not read into the record, simply because they're not matters before the planning board. And if the neighbor has concerns about what's going on there being inappropriate, there are other avenues for that to come forward.
All right, Mr. Chairman, then I withdraw my concern. Thank you.
Well, I mean, if you want to express any or ask any questions of the applicant, feel free.
No, if it's not relevant, I think I don't need to prolong the misery.
Okay. Does any member of the board have any discussion for Mr. Andrick? Tim, you got your hand up.
Just wanted to mention again in regard to one of the correspondence, setting a precedent. I know you had mentioned it, that this is at least the sixth.
Oh, Jenny, baby.
Somebody's got some background noise.
This is at least the sixth different home occupation for a firearms related business that the town has seen. Several actually, I think Merrimack Firearms on DW Highway originally started as a home occupation. He grew the home occupation, and then moved into a commercial area. This particular type of business was actually litigated all the way through the courts to the Supreme Court in New Hampshire, where the Supreme Court declined to take up an appeal for his previous application for a home occupation for a firearms business. The Superior Court in that case upheld the planning board's determination that a firearms business is a legitimate home occupation so long as it meets the criteria from our ordinance.
Thank you for that summary. And there were a couple of others that that Robert pulled out. There were recent ones that we could see some precedents. I don't necessarily want to dive much deeper into the discussion of them, simply because if their life is proceeding rather smoothly, no need to be drawing attention to people whose applications are long ago before us. I can recall the first time that we saw one of these, and we very frequently have several neighbors come out and express concerns about these kinds of businesses. One of the things that I did at that time was I took a look at the ATF website, Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms. You can take a look at the lists of firearms licenses that are there, and there's all sorts of statistics and several companies who buy that list and then form different ways to contact and reach out to people with the firearms licenses. And at that time, I was able to find a statistic quoted that said 2/3 of the FFLs in the country are in residential businesses. 2/3 of all of the FFLs in the country. This is not just unique to New Hampshire or to Merrimack. This is just the way that it's done, and it doesn't really require. Hasn't presented to us any significant realization of the concerns that people raise with the idea of traffic or crime or the wrong element or those kinds of things. I think one of the letters mentioned the idea of random individuals coming. The people who come to seek the services of a person with a federal firearms license are anything but random. They're known the entire way through with background checks and all the rest of that. It's not what people suspect.
Just to add, because Bill wasn't here at the beginning of the meeting, this item, Robert Price did follow up with the police department on this, and they did not have any particular concerns with this application before the board tonight.
Okay. All right. Let me stop yakking and let the board have its say. Does anyone wish to weigh in? I can't hear who's speaking or who's.
I believe that's Bill.
Bill, is that okay? Go ahead, Bill.
That's okay. Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it. Just a one additional question for Mr. Andrick. Are you going to be using any type of lubricants, grease in the context of repairing these firearms? And once you're done, what is your method of disposal of the remnants of your repairs?
No, I am not. You weren't on the call when we.
I apologize.
Yeah, let me just explain to you exactly what I'm doing. I do dealing right now through the internet. I got approval for that a couple of years ago. Now, to have people come and do it, but in terms of when people come and purchase a firearm, a lot of times they want it customized. And the difference between replacing an item that does not modify a firearm and modifying a firearm to the point it's considered a manufactured item, the regulations, the federal regulations, are a little bit hard to understand. They're a little bit obtuse, and all of the ATF agents have different interpretations about it. So when I first wrote this to the guy, I have an ATF agent that kind of overlooks my, he's responsible for my company. And he said, the best thing for you to do is get a manufacturer's license. And then just anytime you make a modification to a gun, there's a report manufacturers have to file at the end of every year. File it with everything you've done. Maybe 90% of it is not manufacturing and we throw it away. But anything that is manufacturing, we've got it, and you have a record that you submitted it. So it's more of a CYA for me than anything else.
Okay.
And I'm not planning on doing any machining or anything like that. All I'm going to be doing, for example, changing to a lighter pulled trigger can be considered a manufacturing item. You know, I'm going to be just replacing items with commercially available substitutes. No hazardous materials, no machining, nothing like that.
So in layman's terms, you're working on a Ford Mustang. Instead of using stock parts, you're using something that you bought at ADAP.
Pretty much. And I just don't want an ATF agent to come after me and say, hey, that was a manufacturing item and you didn't report it.
And I agree with you. I agree with where you're coming from. I guess the second question I have is how firm are you on wanting to work on a Saturday? I don't have as it stands right now, I don't have a problem with the application. I mean, the hours are limited. I'm just Saturday, to me that's a weekend that I'm not trying to interfere, but I think, neighborhoods have an interest.
Well, I mean, a weekend is a big time for anybody that does any kind of retailing and merchandising. I'm predicting, or I'm assuming there's going to be less than one person a day that's going to be coming by. I mean, I work full time during the week, and I don't want to be spending all weekend selling guns. So, I expect that it's going to be very minor. In fact, I'd be willing to accept a board stipulation. Less than 2 people a week, or 8 people, 2 people a day, or 8 people a week, or something like that. If that would make the board feel comfortable. Yeah, I think at least one weekend day for a couple of hours is probably necessary for the people that work.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bill. Any more questions by members of the board? If not, is someone prepared to propose some final disposition of this application?
Mr. Chairman, this is Alistair Milnes. I make a motion that we, following this discussion with Mr. Andrew, who seems to have clarified all our concerns, I make a motion we accept this matter approve this matter in terms of everything that's been said, and I'm comfortable that we can grant conditional final approval with the following conditions, according to the memo of Mr. Robert Price dated July the 15th of 2020, and any other information that Mr. Andrick has very kindly given us.
Is there a second for Alistair's motion to grant conditional final approval?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman, with the friendly amendment that we stipulate that no more than 8 customers per week visit the abode to transact with Mr. Andrick.
Alistair, is that consistent with the motion?
I'm very happy to accept Mr. Boyd's amendment, Mr. Chairman. This is Alistair Milnes.
Thank you.
Speaking to the motion, I'm usually pretty reluctant to put those kinds of limitations on there because it's tough to count or even enforce. However, I think it's a generous number that's way more than what the applicant thinks he needs. And so I don't think it'll restrict him in any significant way. And so I would support the motion.
And what I would point out to you, Mr. Chairman, is that the applicant floated the idea of 8 clients per week, which is why I made the amendment that I did. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's consistent.
Clarify for the motion and the amendment that would be a general and subsequent condition, not a precedent, obviously, because it's operational in nature. And
Correct.
I also note that it does appear that we have a hand up from my phone number here as well.
Okay. For the sake of being very complete and respecting the difficulties of managing the technology, even though we've finished the public hearing, let's go back and reopen that. The motion is still on the floor and properly seconded, but let's hear from the member by phone who has their hand up. It is the person whose phone number ends with 316. And so when you're unmuted, please introduce yourself and give your address first, and then provide what you'd like the board to know. Are you there, caller? Phone number 316.
Yes, I am.
Oh, there you are. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you'd like the board to know.
My name's Irene Donnelly.
Hi, Irene.
I'm Irene Donnelly. Hi. 15 Matthew Drive.
Thank you, Irene.
I have
did
a
read your
question.
email, but please go ahead.
I want to know if this business is limited only to handguns. When you talk about firearms, I'd like to know what kind of guns.
Okay. We can certainly propose that question to the application, but nothing that has been submitted to us or anything that's been submitted to the ATF suggests that it's limited to any particular style of gun, and it would be whatever is lawful for people to buy and sell. And so shotguns and rifles would certainly be included in that. But let me check with the applicant just to verify that. Mr. Andrick.
Yes, that's true. The license is good for all firearms that are legal to own and possess in New Hampshire.
Okay. All right, so we've made that clarification, and with that, we've got a motion properly seconded before the board. If there's no further discussion, then let's do a roll call vote. Let's see, Lynn, let's do ladies first. How do you vote?
I vote in favor.
Alistair, how do you vote?
This is Alistair Milnes, and I vote in favor.
Paul, how do you vote?
Vote no.
Bill Boyd, how do you vote?
Bill Boyd votes aye.
And Bob Best votes aye. So that is 4-1-0 to grant conditional final approval to the applicant. Tim, is there anything else that we need to clarify for the record in order to finish this item?
No, there is not.
Thank you for that. Let's see.
Can I assume I'll get something from the planning department now with the approval and all the stipulations, just something I can rely on?
When I get into the office tomorrow morning, one of the first things I'll be doing is putting together the decision letters from tonight's meeting.
That's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Andrick, and thank you to all the others that provided their opinion either by mail or with respect to the person who provided live testimony. Thank you for that. It's helpful to the board. We will now reorder our agenda. I want to bring item number 9 next, and this is for the convenience of 2 applicants who are represented by the same engineering company who can do back-to-back presentations on those items. So we'll bring up number 9 now, which is Governor's Hill Corporation as the applicant and Richard and Marilyn Brown and Governor's Hill Corporation as the owners. And it is review for acceptance and consideration of final approval for a lot line adjustment. The parcels are located at 31 and 33 Constant Street in the R1 Residential by Soils District, Tax Map 6D, Lot 137 and 136, Case Planning Board 2020-15. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In your packet, you'll find a memo dated July 13th from myself regarding this application. Both of these lots are lots in the old Level Acres subdivision that is not too far from the Reed's Ferry School. In this particular case, the applicants are looking to do a minor lot line adjustment to address an encroachment of a structure over the property line. The end result is that the same amount of property will transfer pre and post application, so there's no change in the overall size of the 2 parcels. Only the lot line configuration would change. However, because these lots were old pre-existing non-conforming lots, the modification triggered the need for a variance. So they did appear before the zoning board at the end of June, obtain the necessary variances to move forward with this application here tonight.
Thank you for that introduction, Tim. And Matt, is this your project to present to us?
It is.
Right, introduce yourself first and then tell us about it.
Now, can you guys see the screen? Is it shared?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, good evening. Matt Peterson with Keach Nordstrom Associates, here representing their post 31 Constant Street lot line adjustment. I'd like to just give you a little history first. I think Tim kind of just went through it here. But first off, the owners here at 60-137, basically the long-term residents of Merrimack. When they purchased this house, they had a septic plan that they were going off of to put in their driveway and their shed. Both of those, here's the driveway right here, and then the shed is located kind of up in the woods here. So you can see, I mean, it's been there a long, long time. Obviously, we now realize that the septic plan that they were going off of at the time was incorrect. They had put this shed, little brown shed right here in the corner, and they had done some improvements to the driveway in this location here. When my client purchased this property, they reached out to staff back in February. Robert had put together a memo to them that stated that this would be the best way to go about it. All we're trying to do is keep them whole and not move anything. We're taking 700 feet out up in this location here, and we're replacing 700 feet down here in this location here. So as Tim said, the exact same pre and post lot area would be accomplished, and it's a pretty straightforward lot line adjustment. So I think I'll keep it simple and just answer any questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Your clients are the ones with the pink lot?
My client is the one with the blue.
With the blue. Okay. And the one with the pink encroached on them, and this is the solution for it.
Yes.
Okay. I think that helps. Understanding that the blue lot is before us, and is consenting to this adjustment is obviously pretty key to it, because they're the ones that have been encroached upon, and provide the solution. Okay. Board members, we're free to ask any questions that we'd like, but the first step before us is to decide whether the application is substantially complete and contains sufficient information to invoke the board's jurisdiction. Does anybody have any questions on that topic? If not, is there a motion with respect to completeness?
I make a motion that we have sufficient information to enable us to make a decision on this project.
Seconded, Bill Boyd.
Motion by Alistair, second by Bill Boyd to find the application complete. Let's do the roll call vote. Lynn?
I'm in favor.
Alistair?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
I also vote aye, so it's 5-0-0 to find the application complete. There hasn't been any discussion of a need for waivers, but the staff indicates that we can determine that waivers are not necessary in a lot line adjustment under section 407. Matt, are you anticipating that any waivers from our regulations are necessary in order to make this happen?
I am not.
Okay. And so then it's appropriate for the board to either ask questions about necessary to inform for final, or we will go on to our public hearing and find out if there's any abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in. Does the board have any questions? Are there any abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in?
We have Matt stop sharing the screen so we can see if we have anybody up.
Yeah, Matt, can you?
Yep, I'm figuring it out. Hold on. Where's nuts? Okay, how come the button doesn't pop back up?
Look at the top of the screen and see if there's a red button that says stop sharing or something like that.
There you go. Thank you. There you go. Perfect.
All right. Are there anybody on the phone that wishes to weigh in? Press *9 to raise your hand, and we will recognize you. I see nobody raising their hand. Going once, going twice. Has everybody had an opportunity to do that? If not, then we'll close the public hearing. There's no written responses from any member of the public that we've received on this. And so with that in mind, is the board prepared to take final action to dispose of the proposed application?
Mr. Chairman, this is Alistair Milnes. I make a motion that we grant conditional final approvals to this application.
Seconded, Mr. Chairman.
The conditions outlined in the staff memo.
Yes, sorry, I should have included that statement with the conditions that are outlined in the staff memo.
All right. Motion by Alistair, second by Bill Boyd to grant conditional final approval subject to the conditions in the staff memo. If there's no further discussion, Lynn, how do you vote?
In favor.
Alistair, how do you vote?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Bill?
Boyd, aye.
Bob Best says aye. That's 5-0-0 to grant conditional final approval to this application. Thank you for that, and you will receive a letter. Now, Matt, you're still up. Let's get to item number 6 on our agenda, which is Linda Raymond as the applicant and owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval for a 2-lot subdivision. The parcel is located at 107 Turkey Hill Road in the R1 Residential by Soils and Aquifer Conservation Districts. Tax map 4C, lot 229, case planning board 2020-13. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your packets, you'll find a memo dated July 17th from Assistant Planner Casey Wolf. This again is another project that has had a visit with the Zoning Board of Adjustment. This is an existing lot, very irregularly shaped, which I'm sure Matt will show you when we get to the screen share. The zoning board granted a variance back in January to allow less than required amount of frontage for the lot to be created in this case. Other than that, it's relatively straightforward in terms of the compliance with the regulations, and we have just a few comments and conditions recommended for this particular application.
Excellent. Thank you. Matt, I know that you did introduce yourself before, but do it again. And then let us know what's on your mind for tell us about this proposal.
All right. Good evening, Matt Peterson again with Keach Nordstrom Associates for the proposed subdivision at 107 Turkey Hill Road, tax map 4C lot 229. So the existing parcel, which would be both the pink and the blue, is approximately 11.49 acres. All right. The variance was obtained to reduce the frontage right here down to about 59 feet. I think it's 59.33 is what the variance was for. We now would like to subdivide these into two lots. The pink lot would keep the existing house, the owner that is working with us to subdivide this. That lot there would be about 2.775 acres. The remaining blue lot here would be about 8.661 acres. To give you a location, this is the driveway. Let's just go back one here. So there's an existing gravel driveway that comes down right here, and there's actually a cutout in the trees right here. So the two photos would be looking north. This location would be the existing driveway there. And then this is where we're proposing the common driveway now. So we're going to get rid of the driveway that's right up here on the right, and we do one common driveway that's going to come right where these trees are already cut at this point here. You can see that here on the topographic subdivision plan. As I said, you can see the existing tree line kind of cut there and there. We'd look to put the driveway common here, tie it into the existing gravel driveway here, and then bring this one up to a location that would be back in the back part of the lot here. Building setbacks are shown up in here, as we have most of the land for the home at that location. I think one of the comments, and I noticed it on my plans, this driveway was still shown. This is being removed. It was one of the comments from staff. We're not looking to have two driveway curb cuts at the same location. We were doing a common. We did easements over this property here for the benefit of this one. And then we have an easement over this one here for the benefit of the other lot. We've obtained state subdivision approval for the lot right now. That came in the other day. We also did a site distance plan at that new location to meet the requirements for staff. They've reviewed that. There is some trees that need to be removed in this location here. You can kind of see them from the photo. You can't see the photo here. They would be at this location. This tree here is one, and then there's some trees on the back side that's here. So pretty straightforward lot line adjustment plan. Subdivision plan. Definitely kind of a weird L shape behind it, but substantial in size with the 8 acres. And we're looking for subdivision approval from staff. Again, I think it's getting later, and I'll take any comments that the board has.
Thank you, Matt. As before, the first question before us is to determine whether the application is complete and it contains enough information to invoke our jurisdiction. Does the board have any questions on that subject? If not, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, this is Alistair Mills. I make a motion that we vote to accept the application as substantially complete and contains sufficient information to invoke the jurisdiction of this board.
Is there a second for Alistair's motion?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Councilor Boyd. Let's go through our roll call vote. Lynn, how do you vote? She might have dropped out. She indicated she warned us that she might. You there, Lynn?
I'm in favor.
Okay, Lynn's in favor. Alistair?
Aye.
Paul?
Vote aye.
Bill Boyd?
Aye.
And this is Bob Best. I vote aye. So that's 5-0-0 to determine that it's complete. There is, the applicant's not shown a sidewalk, but in a minor subdivision, we can determine by section 407 that a sidewalk waiver is not necessary if that's the will of the board. I don't see any other waivers that are before us or potential waivers that are before us. We've typically determined in a minor subdivision like this that those are not necessary. And if it is the will of the board to do that, we should probably simply include that in our final motion, that it's conditional final approval with determination the sidewalk is or is not necessary, depending on if the board likes to do that. General questions or discussion about the proposal?
This is Alistair Milnes, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the plan before me, it would appear that where this split driveway is going to be created, there is in fact wetlands. If I read the map correctly, there's a small amount of wetlands which goes right across that driveway. Has the applicants jointly decided what they're going to do about that?
Matt, what do you think about that? You showed us a map that had the wetlands colored in brown. You want to bring that one up again?
I'm going to go to the topo plan here that shows here. So currently the wetlands were mapped and there was already a breakthrough, and that's why we're bending the road and bringing it through. So the wetlands came out to here and the wetlands came out to here. I'm assuming that this person probably was using the back land for something or other to get back there and stuff like that. So this was looked at by a wetland scientist, flagged at this here. We do not have a wetland crossing. It's why we're moving the road through this location and putting it on both lots.
Just to follow up on that for the board, that type of driveway access through what would be the wetland buffer is permitted under the zoning ordinance for access.
As long as it's near the wetland but not through it.
Thank you. This is Alistair Milnes. I accept what's been said.
Bill Boyd, you had a hand up a little while ago.
Yeah, dovetailing off of Alistair's comments, because that's where I was going. The question, and this is just from my understanding, Matt, are you going to put a culvert underneath that to link one side of the wetland to the other? Is that how you're going to be able to get the road through there, is the use of a culvert?
That is one thing I did not look at yet, but I would say, I'm just trying to see, it looks to me like they both drain either direction with the 200 and 200. It's kind of a high point right there. Yes, I would put a culvert underneath the road if the dynamics of the wetland is going from one to the next. I just can't give you 100% that that's the way it goes. But if that is the case, then yes, I would put a 12-inch culvert just to equalize the two between them.
And question for Tim, is that something from a technical perspective we would want to have put on the plan to reflect that, if that's the professional opinion of Matt for his client?
There would not be anything that would need to be substantially noted on the plan because it's not within the town's right of way.
Okay, thank you. The second, I guess, Tim, since I have you, the second question is the second lot is close to about 9 acres. Is any of this further subdividable, or is this going to be the limit that the applicant can go?
There would not be the ability to further subdivide this lot without additional relief from the zoning board.
Okay.
You've got minimal frontage created for the access to this lot. The only way I could potentially see any further subdivision would be for the zoning board to basically grant a lot with no frontage and a shared driveway of some sort, or access through one of the adjacent properties. But any of those alternatives would require relief from the zoning board first.
And the proposed 16-foot wide common driveway, obviously 16 feet's wouldn't be suitable. They'd have to upgrade that, correct?
They will need to meet the requirements of the fire department in terms of suitable access for prior protection.
Okay, but as it stands right now for the two lots, the second lot, did the fire department sign off on this?
From my understanding, there are no specific comments from the fire department regarding any issues they have with the proposal at this stage.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, just one more quick follow-up.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Matt, do you, in your professional opinion, and I noticed that there's just a lot of activity on that common driveway where you've got jurisdictional wetlands, you've got access and utility easements, another access and utility easement. Do you think that there's an overburdening on those particular easements as it relates to the design, or are you comfortable with the ability to be able to have a person be able to access the second lot and the person next door being able to access their house with minimal issue?
I think from my professional opinion, what you've stated upon earlier is if this thing could be subdivided further or done something more, I think you would be creating snow plowing issues or stuff like that to have multiple people back there. With one entity going back there, and basically this lady's been at this house forever. So I feel that this is adequate for the one home. I think things would change if we tried to do more back there. Absolutely.
Matt, I appreciate your candor and thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Bill.
Mr. Chairman. Any other member of the board have any questions for the applicant? Are there any abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in? And if you're on the phone and wish to do so, *9 is the way to raise your hand. I don't see any abutters or citizens weighing in.
We do actually have a hand raised.
Oh, we do. Do that.
Phone
Phone
number
number
ending
391.
Yep.
391. Please introduce yourself and then tell us what you'd like the board to consider.
Yes, my name is Deborah Utero, and I live at 5 Acacia Street, which abuts the proposed subdivision. And I'm here with my husband, Robert Utero. And I have 2 points that I would like to mention, and my husband has a question for the board.
Okay.
Okay. So my first point is, if we look at the neighborhood, including that of abutters, there is no other driveway like the driveway being proposed to access the second house. Its characteristics are: it is shared between the two houses, it winds around wetlands, and with the granting of an easement, is proposed to go onto the applicant's land. The applicant's proposed driveway is out of character with the entire neighborhood, including the property of abutters. And my second point, it does not appear that the land was designed for this type of proposed subdivision, with a house located at the rear of the lot. I thought that's what I heard Matt say earlier. And if I look at the plan for the septic is located at the rear of the lot. The lot's design consists of water runoff from all of the existing homes around it, as well as from the catch basins from surrounding roads, creating a collector bowl-like area on the property. With the configuration of the lot and the existing road network, it is clear that the lots in the neighborhood were designed for one dwelling with adequate frontage to permit a house with a dedicated driveway for each house, and not a shared driveway designed to access the dwelling near, which quite possibly could be near the proposed septic system at the rear of the lot. And my husband, Robert Utero, has a further question.
Thank you, Mrs. Utero. I think we've taken note of the comments that you've had, and we'll have the applicant respond to them as they feel appropriate, and the board can follow up on those questions. Mr. Utero, Robert.
Yes.
Please weigh in.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. The first being that the marketing team that is advertising the property, some of them have put out marketing the property with the possibility that you could build a home at the other end of the property down near the marsh area, and they're saying that is marketed as an ideal location for a home, and that to gain access to that you would have to gain an easement through a town-owned lot. And the only one that we are aware of that is the one off of Sarah Drive. So my question is it possible at some point that you could have an easement on one side going in to one house and an easement coming off of Sarah Drive with another property being built? And if you only had the one property and not two properties being built on that land, is it possible that you could actually have the ability to drive through that entire property from one easement end to the other easement end. So that is question number one. And question number two, I'd like to know if possible, have there been any test pits done and percolation tests done with respect to building on any part of the property? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Utero. Mrs. Utero, and your questions, and Mr. Utero, your second question, are ones that I think the applicant can address. With respect to your first question, Mr. Utero, about the possibility of accessing the property by an easement over, it looks like map 4C lot 99 is a town-owned lot. Those kinds of things, in order to achieve that, I guess the potential concern is either that there ends up being two houses back there or more, or that there's somehow a way that cars can go from one end to another. I can say that achieving that requires a number of levels of relief from the zoning board and then also relief from the town council. Town council would have to grant you permission to use their lot or sell their lot to them or something like that. If the person was able to buy that lot, then they would have frontage along Sarah Road. They could merge it with this lot and make some changes and potentially access some parts of that property. Without being able to buy or obtain the town's permission to use that lot, there's no ability for us as a planning board to do that or for the applicant to do it on its own. If there ever was some kind of home on the, on the northern part of the property that is accessed from this common shared driveway across the entirety of the 8 acres, that's up to the applicant to decide what to do with their driveway and how to lay it out. And they certainly could have a very long driveway that meandered through the property and put a house over on the northern part of the property. If there ever was some interconnection between driveways there, which I can't imagine happening, but if there ever was, it would not be a public way that any member of the driving down the road could use as a cut through or anything like that that would create traffic down that way. I think that in terms of the kinds of relief you'd need from the zoning board, from the planning board, from town council, it strikes me as being a highly unlikely scenario, but if all of those stars aligned for the applicant, I think that it's possible. Tim, did I get that wrong?
You've got it right, Mr. Chairman. There is no way to do anything further with any further subdivision of this lot without significant further relief from the zoning board. And at this stage, given the limited frontage that's available for this lot to be created, I just don't see that there's, again, short of being able to obtain the property, which I see as a long shot at best. I don't see that happening. In terms of the house placement, there is nothing that this board has any jurisdiction over in terms of where a house is placed in a single-family lot. As long as it meets setback requirements, they can place a home anywhere within the property that's being subdivided.
Thank you, Tim. And now for the applicant, if you're able to respond to the concerns raised by Mrs. Utero and the second one from Mr. Utero. Mr. Utero had asked about test pits, and I'm confident you can answer that. Mrs. Utero talked about the design of the lot and its consistency with the character of the neighborhood with a joint use driveway, and also some other questions about the aesthetics as to the layout of the parcel and how it fits in with the neighborhood and what some of the expectations of other property owners might have been. Matt, you want to address those?
Yes, this is the topographic subdivision plan. So we did do a test pit here on the existing lot, and we did do a test pit here on the proposed lot. As I said, we have state subdivision approval for these two lots. So we did do test pits out there, pretty standard New Hampshire type materials out there. As far as it was talked about kind of topo and stuff, you'll see here, this is the 210 contour up in here, 208, 206, 204. So a high point, the person that was talking is this here, 4C111. That's 5 Eckett Street right there. So a high point here, so this was draining this way, not back that way there. And then, yes, I mean, you know, they could, if they wanted to build a 2,000 foot long driveway for $200,000, it'd have to be a pretty big house or a pretty expensive house to put back in here to make the numbers work. But as was stated by Tim, it's a lot of record that we would be looking to get approved, and they can put the house where they want. As far as coming back out, I think a couple things. Number one, as is noticed, there's no right of ways around here. Everything's owned by residents. So you'd have to get somebody to do something with you. And most of these lots seem to be pretty minor in size, especially up on the backside here. And then lastly, I'll just say, as far as this lot coming in with a longer driveway, I mean, there's a flag lot right here in the middle of my property that kind of does the exact same thing. Doesn't bring the driveway back as far, but still brings it back. So I think as the years have gone by, we've definitely seen longer driveways. Some people like their privacy. Some people like shorter driveways. But it is consistent with what other types of lots we have been doing in the past, I'd say 5 to 10 years in different towns and stuff like that. I think that addresses the questions. If there was another one, I'd be happy to answer it.
I think you did, Matt. The only thing I would follow up on is the questions about the character of the neighborhood and whatnot. None of those are items that really fall under the subdivision regulation part of this review. Those were items that were more appropriate at the zoning board level. And once the zoning board granted the variance to allow the lot to be created with this amount of frontage, that cat is kind of out of the bag.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add to that, I agree with all of that. I think also the subdivision regulations and even some of the zoning regulations that permit you to have lots that share driveways is a determination from a policy standpoint that those are consistent with the character of the neighborhoods around the town. That two lot shared driveways as well as single lot individual driveways or a mix of the two is consistent with what's expected in the what is this, R4? R1 zone. Do other members, I'm sorry, we only spoke to one member of the public. We didn't close the public hearing. Does anyone else have their hand up, wish to weigh in on the application for the board? All right, seeing none, then we'll close the public hearing, and let me invite the board members to ask any questions you may have about the proposed plan. Bill.
Just a quick question to Tim. Tim, back to the conversation we just had regarding Mr. Utero's concern regarding the town-owned lot on Sarah Drive. You've got jurisdictional wetlands there. They'd have to go to DES to get a dredge permit or something that would allow them to impact the wetlands in order for them to if they wanted to access that property. I mean, it's not there's a lot of steps for them to get in there is what I'm getting at.
That's correct. It would be, in addition to town approvals, it would be dredge and fill state wetlands permit, which for a lot of this nature, I think would be tricky.
And the border there between the land and the town of Merrimack's land, that's also pretty tight as well, correct?
Yes.
Would you know? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very tight one. I would, if I understand the neighbors' concerns about having the open space behind all of these lots, and frankly, if I didn't know who owned what and how it was done, and I just looked at this plan, I'd see that somebody designed an open space subdivision. Of course, that's not what was designed. It's what it looks like, but that's not what it is. And so I can understand from the neighbor's viewpoint thinking, I never expected there to be a house built behind my house. And trust me, there are houses being built behind my house today for the exact same reason. There's a 4-lot subdivision right behind my house where they build houses where they never were before. So I get it. I know what it's about. But although it looks like an open space subdivision where that space was intended to be kind of everybody's common open space, that's not actually how it was ever subdivided or regulated. It's always been one lot that has been meandering back there, and it's in private ownership. So that gives the owner of that lot the right to make use of it to the extent that they're able, with the relief that the zoning board approved for them. Anyone else have comments or questions about the layout? Paul, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm looking at it, and I don't know if this falls upon us, but with the driveway cutting through the wetlands as it is, has anybody brought up anything about snow melt or road salt for a driveway that size? Limiting the use or anything like that?
That's a really interesting question. If this was commercial, we certainly would be discussing what snow and salt and all of that. I don't believe that our subdivision regulations permit us to examine what a homeowner does on their home driveway.
The board could certainly encourage it, but I don't believe you could require.
Yeah, and I think that, hopefully the applicant hears that and recognizes that wetlands are fragile and putting salt in wetlands is bad for them. It's also bad for anybody with a well in the area. I don't know if this is on, if it's R1, it must be on town water. Putting salt in your driveway that runs into a wetland is a bad plan. Hopefully the applicants will avoid that. Other discussion, Paul? Other items?
No, that was all I had, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any other members of the board have any discussion items? If not, is the board prepared to take final disposition of the application? All right, somebody's got to make a motion to go one direction or another.
Mr. Chairman, this is Alistair Milnes. I simply do not like this subdivision. I think it's not quite keyhole development, but the driveway makes me feel very uncomfortable. So I regret, and despite hearing that the zoning board approved it and the state's approved it, I make a motion that we do not accept this for accept this project as acceptable.
Okay, so Alistair makes a motion to deny the application. Is there a second?
Second that motion.
Paul seconds that motion. I wouldn't support the motion to deny the application. I understand what we feel about flag lots and narrow entrances and things like that, but the fact is that nothing in our regulations prohibit it. And so
also reasons for the denial in your motion in order to make sure that it would be defensible if we were sued.
Alistair, would you like to clarify some of the reasons for the motion?
Request from Mr. Thompson. I consider the item, the driveway is unacceptable with the wetlands there and everything else there. I believe they cannot make a satisfactory driveway which does not damage wetlands and is simply unsatisfactory and doesn't meet the sort of criteria I think we should be looking for.
Okay. Is there other discussion on the motion? All right, then let's do the roll call vote. Now this is, as we go through the vote, it's important for everybody to pay attention to what it is we're voting on. This is a motion to deny the application. So if you vote yes, you're voting to deny the application. If you do not wish to deny the application, then you should vote no. Lynn, how do you vote?
I vote no.
Alistair, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Paul, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
Bill, how do you vote?
Boyd votes nay.
Bob Best votes no. So that motion fails 2-3. That leaves the board with the opportunity to take up another motion for final disposition of this application.
I will so move that we approve the application as presented to the terms and conditions in staff memo.
Is there a second for Lynn's motion for approval?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Bill Boyd seconds the motion to grant conditional final approval subject to the conditions in the staff memo. I assume we've all discussed it thoroughly enough and ready to vote, but I'll pause. Does anyone wish to weigh in further?
Are we also incorporating that the sidewalk waiver is not necessary per section 407?
Lynn, is that consistent with your motion?
That's
And Bill, is that consistent with your second?
Absolutely.
Okay. Then let's do the roll call vote. This is a motion to approve the application, and so a yes vote is to approve and a no vote is to deny. Lynn, how do you vote?
Approve.
Alistair, how do you vote?
Nay.
Paul, how do you vote?
I vote nay.
Bill, how do you vote?
Boyd votes aye.
Bob Best votes yes. That's 3-2 to grant conditional final approval for the application. So that is conditional final approval. The motion passes. Thank you to the applicant and thank you to the planning board for working through one where we disagree. We don't always have to agree. We are allowed to have difference of opinions on things.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
That concludes item number 6 on our agenda. We're up to item number 7, which is Synergy Storage Structures LLC as the petitioner and owner. Review for consideration of an amendment to a previous conditionally approved site plan regarding access and parking. The parcel is located at 403 Daniel Webster Highway in the I-1 Industrial, Aquifer Conservation, and Elderly Housing Overlay Districts. A portion of the parcel is subject to the Flood Hazard Conservation District. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In your packet, you'll find a memo from Robert Price dated July 17th. This is regards to the Synergy self-storage plan that has been granted several extensions. This was for the paving of the back access way and the use of that area for storage and the associated drainage improvements. The applicant and his design firm have come up with final plans that are there with the exception of 3 items as are outlined in Robert's memo. And because of the way this particular project is, because this is a request to amend in a conditional approval, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail than we typically go through. In this case, the first condition they're seeking to amend is condition number 11A from the notice of decision, which was that the driveway to Wright Avenue has already been paved and the right-of-way permit was not obtained. As a result, drainage issues that originate in SRS Petroleum Services are now settling at the end of the driveway. The proposed curb should be extended to meet the existing Wright Avenue pavement. The end of curb should be flattened to prevent catching by the snowplow. The applicant's designer is asking that that particular condition be amended. Their response is that typically curbing is never extended into a right-of-way where an existing roadway is not curbed. This would inherently be a maintenance issue for the town as the curb would likely get hit by the wing of the plow. Tipping it down at the end would not alleviate the issue. Further, the installation of curbing could exacerbate the ponding issue as would act as a dam to the driveway instance. There have been improvements to drainage in this area. As such, the applicant is seeking a waiver to section 4.13.1 of the site plan regs in order to eliminate the need to install that curbing. At the time of the hearing, the board granted a waiver to 705D20, but there was no action taken on this particular section. As a result of that, the Public Works Department has been requiring that the curbing that the applicant proposes in the area to be extended meet the existing pavement of Wright Ave. Public Works is currently opposed to the granting of this waiver and prefers the curb be extended as required by the conditional approval. The second condition the applicant is looking to amend is to add a Cape Cod berm along the westerly side of the vehicle storage area adjacent to the wetland on the adjacent map on sheet 6. The design firm has responded that the berm has not been added due to the drainage paths. The flow travels along and onto the parking area down to the wet pond. To ensure that the flow path remains as intended, the curbing is not proposed. This is not opposed by the staff or the Public Works Department. The condition was placed by the planning board at the time of the approval as an attempt to try to further protect the wetland from untreated runoff. The plans have been reviewed by Public Works and they're generally in agreement with the applicant's argument against installing that berm. The final condition that they're looking to amend is that the applicant add an oil water separator to the wet pond. The design firm is basically stating that the DES Alteration of Terrain Bureau has already regulated the sizing and lining of the pond and that it doesn't require that oil water separator. And again, if the board is agreeing that the oil water separator is not necessary in accordance with the state's AOT permit, you would need to vote to eliminate that condition. So ultimately, there's 3 things to determine. One is the waiver regarding the curbing to Wright Avenue. And then there is the elimination of the Cape Cod berm along the driveway and the oil water separator. We recommend that you vote first on the waiver request regarding the Cape Cod berm and the curbing into Wright Ave and review the applicant's justification and the recommendations of Public Works. And then after the waiver, you can take action on the requested amendments, including the removal of condition 13C and 13D. The applicant also has, later on, we have a request for a continuance. Should the board determine that you do not wish to amend the conditional approval, we would then ask you later in the evening to consider and grant an extension to their conditional approval so that the applicant can address the conditions depending on how this goes tonight.
Thank you, Tim, for all of that. I thought I heard you go through this and indicate that the first one was a waiver and the second 2 were amendments, but Aren't they all amendments?
They are all amendments. However, the first one requires a waiver to be granted in order to amend.
Okay, so in order to grant that amendment, we would also have to waive a portion of the regulations.
Correct.
Okay, I gotcha. Thank you for that clarification. Now we have Chris and Joel on the connections, don't we? Or which one of you is going to represent?
We're both going to represent Chris Ross, 401 and 403 Daniel Webster Highway. Joel, can you introduce yourself? Your mic's not on, buddy. Joel.
Let's see if we can do it for him. His mic is now, he's not muted. Joel, you still there?
Yeah.
Has he got the camera on? Can we see him? Yeah, he's got his finger up. Wait a second, he's saying. All right. No problem. Take your time. Might have one of those internet connections that's just not stable enough to do the audio.
While he's doing that,
okay,
I just want to point out something.
Yes.
This has been a lesson learned. Pay attention when you develop land. Pay attention.
Thank you for noting that. Do you want to begin the presentation and let him?
I just want to say that first of all, I want to apologize to the board. I know we've this has been dragged out beyond dragged out. I have got a call log, very lengthy. I have followed up week after week after week with the state, with our engineer, and it has taken way too long, and I apologize for that. We have met AOT regulation, which I'm against. I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's overkill, but it was a spanking, and we took it, and we're moving forward. The three things that we're asking for are really common sense. I would like to remind you all to please remember the properties that surround our site. More importantly, the property to the left of my right-of-way and the property to the left of our right-of-way. And I'm looking for fairness. Case in point with that curbing, I don't want to take on Wright Avenue's stormwater. I don't think I should have to. I don't even think that's legal. And the engineer points that out in his notes. The oil separator, again, I mean, look at the fuel company next door, their drainage system that they recently put in. Take a visit today and ask yourself, is that up to par as it was approved? No, it's not. I think we are installing overkill. We have spent 22 grand on engineering, and we're spending thousands on implementing what we're about to implement with this drainage. I think it's overkill. We're going to do it, but these three things I think are minor and I think are fair in what we're asking for. So please be open-minded. I think Joel's going to be better to explain this because I'm a little too hot-headed and I want to calmly see this through. Joel?
You're doing fine with the calmness. You're not being hot-headed at all. Don't worry about that. Thank you for the comments to recognize the history, and we do the same thing. But that's we'll give you. It's our job to give you a level playing field and a fair shake, and it's got nothing to do with the background and the history. So I'll do my best to make sure that that's the direction that we take, and we evaluate what's before us based on the merits. Joel, you had a hand up, and I don't know if that meant your sound was working now, or I can't hear you.
Joel, come in my office.
Come join him.
Come in my office, bud, please.
You can also dial in by phone if you want.
No,
Joel.
That's okay. He'll come in my office. It's okay. It's okay. Have a seat.
All right, so I'm going to take this spot here now. So just a quick note. First, with regards to the roadway, that as far back as you go, that roadway has always been there. It was used prior to SRS Petroleum. That site was owned by RH White, and they used that roadway as access to. They used the first part of that roadway to access the backside of their site. So there was no, when we went and actually put the pavement in there was no work done to the road as far as preparation. So the drainage issue that is there now has always been there. So we're just, the reason for paving the road initially was to hopefully alleviate some of that drainage issues that were there, because we kept having repeated washouts and whatnot on that driveway.
Would you recall the photos that I showed you years ago? Remember those photos?
So anyway, that was the part of the reason for putting the pavement in there. With regards to the curb, as Chris already mentioned, I mean, to go ahead and put curbing in place there, it would just, as the Dubé group said, it just exaggerates that problem that's already there. We'd be capturing every bit of water that comes down Wright Avenue and sending it right down our roadway and then into that pond. It's, and then again, to have the curb there on Wright Avenue where there is no curb to begin with, if there's no curb on the road when they come through there with the plow, obviously with the wing plow is going to be extend into, off the edge of the pavement by at least a couple of feet. Any curbing that's there jutting out is going to be totally destroyed and rendered, unusable after the first snowstorm. So, that's what we're looking for. Everything else we plan to do just as the Dubé group has spec'd out. But it's just that little bit of curb there for the end. We really, it's excessive.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation on this. I also noted that from the satellite pictures, I'm nothing to do with our review, but I think it's cool that you put all the solar panels on top of your building. I think it's very cool to be progressive and efficient with that. You can see that from the satellite pictures. So good for you guys. This does not require us to determine that it's complete because it's a modification of a previous site plan. So we don't have to discuss that question or vote on it. Does the board have questions or discussion items regarding the 3 requests that the applicant has made of us? I think we can discuss them all together, but we'll vote on them separately. Bill, was that you ringing it?
Yeah, just I'm only looking with what I have here, and I guess I'd like to know what was DPW's main reason for curbing.
We don't know. The Dubé group, in all the years that they've been doing this, and I think they even noted that in their notes, they've never seen anything like this. And quite honestly, and quite abruptly, we're against it. I mean, we're not going to agree to take on the town's water from another road and have it come running down my driveway into a pond. Who would do that? Who would do that?
I understand. I understand.
Just so you know, why we paved it. We sent photos to the board. If you remember, months back, over a year back, I sent you photos where that water flooded out my entire driveway, and that's what we put a stop to. So why would we sign up for that again? It's ludicrous, and we just can't do that.
Okay. Members of the board, go ahead, Bill. Yeah.
The follow-up question, and I don't know, Tim, if this is your jurisdiction, but did we have our consultants weigh on the conflict between DPW and what Mr. Ross's consultant is saying?
This particular amendment, as it played out to deal with the violations that occurred on the original site plan, were never sent to peer review. So we have not had peer review on this particular, this was all done internally.
I mean, I appreciate Mr. Ross's frustration, and I certainly don't want to be kicking this can further down the road, but do you think we would benefit from having peer review looking at this particular piece?
We wouldn't even agree to it.
I think that would certainly take some time to accomplish, and maybe that's the way that the board wants to go. I know that the question you initially asked was sort of what's DPW after. We didn't. Really
my inclination is, and this is me putting my town council hat on, are some of the MS4 concerns that we have, and some of the responsibilities that this town has taken on as it relates to MS4. If we are asking the applicant to put something there that's only going to exacerbate a situation, it's only going to increase potential costs of the town for potentially cleaning up this stuff through some of our fall sewers. So that's why I'm asking the question whether or not, as it just relates to the curbing piece, whether we need to have peer review talk about this. I know that's not what you want to hear, Mr. Ross, and I apologize.
I hate to interrupt you, but I got to tell you, peer review is going to cost me money. And I ask you this: if you were in my shoes, would you sign up for taking on the roadways water? Nobody in their right mind would. I question the legal standpoint of that solution to begin with. Read the Dubé Group's comments. They've never, in the history of what they've done, have ever seen anything like that. I'm not responsible for Wright Avenue's water. Nobody.
I agree. I'm inclined to agree with you, Mr. Ross.
Okay. So that being said,
but again, in fairness, Mr. Ross, okay, I'm not familiar with the Dubé Group report that you cite. Okay, so that's number one. I'm not familiar with what their analysis is. But number two, there's a conflict, and without having information as it relates to why DPW decided to insist on curbing the way that they did, I personally feel that I'm trying to make a decision in a vacuum.
I understand.
And I want to be able to make the best decision that not only affects you but also impacts that particular area of town as well. I'm not trying to, like I said, I'm not trying to kick this can. I don't feel like I have enough data in front of me to make an opinion one way or the other. And I apologize because you've spent money. I heard you. $22,000. That's real money. I'm not gonna denigrate that, Mr. Ross. I understand that, but I feel I'd like to have some more information on this for this particular point. And it's one out of many that we're talking about tonight. But I feel I'd like to have some more information. And if I'm out of line or if I'm incorrect, then I'm sure I'll be corrected by either staff or the board. So,
if I can, Councilor Boyd and members of the board, I can't speak for Dawn as to why she's not supportive of the waiver. But remember, this is a waiver. This is from the old site plan regulations. That section of the regulations requires the curb to be in that configuration. So that's where the condition came from, is that this is required by the former regulations.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention as well, is that this is not some requirement that the department had come up with as a result of something that they attended to on the site. The default requirement for commercial subdivisions is to do the curbs by your driveway. It's what everybody in town does on all of their sites everywhere, and it's what would have been required if this proposal was presented to us undeveloped on sort of what we call greenfield property. As you know, starting from scratch on a blank slate, is meet this regulation or obtain a waiver from the board for the regulation. When we're asked to waive regulations like this, we do two things. One is seek the department, the DPW's engineering review and what their opinion is. And then the second thing is occasionally we do what Bill is suggesting, which is to have peer review do that. We don't necessarily use peer review to settle disputes between the town and the applicant's engineer, but simply to identify for us in the first instance, what do our regulations require? I think that's what peer review would tell us, is your regulations require curbing. That's what they always do in their reviews. If you're going to decide to waive that regulation, then it's a matter of considering what happens with the water. So it may still be the will of the board to have peer review, but we're not reviewing something that the town has instituted as a single requirement for this project. You're reviewing what the regulation required townwide for every driveway.
My recommendation as the community development director would be that peer review in this particular case would be useless and would not be a proper use of the applicant's money in this case.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay. I love you, buddy.
For now.
Well, let's see where we go with this. I can offer my thoughts on the other two, the oil water separator and the curb on the other side. I think it's easy for us to defer to DES and to defer to our own engineer. And if we're getting information from every professional we turn to, whether it's Dubé, whether it's our DPW, whether it's DES, that these things aren't required, then we shouldn't be requiring them. We're not, as a planning board, we shouldn't be, we ask for these scientists to provide us some information so that we can rely on it. And I don't think it's even sustainable for a board to look at something that the scientists say is A, and us to say, no, we're going to go with B. And so even though I think the oil water separator and the curb were personally my ideas, if they're wrong, they're wrong. I mean, they should be.
They were before AOT had issued a permit and they gave their blessing to the design the engineer came up with.
Yeah, absolutely. And if the water's not flowing in that direction, then there's no point to put a curb there to stop it from flowing in that direction. So with respect to those, I wouldn't have any trouble giving relief to the applicant. I don't know what other board members think. We'll have a chance to figure that out in a little bit. The first one is the challenging one for me. The granting a waiver like this is something where we do turn to the DPW, and they're not just looking at it and saying we don't like you or we don't feel like it. They're providing their expert opinion that in their view, this is something that should be there. I think that we've had some further details at some point. I don't know if they made it into this memo, but
if I can offer a potential suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
There are a couple ways I think you could go about this and kind of punt on the curb issue for tonight. One would be to make a motion regarding the two items that you are comfortable with amending, and then conditionally approve with language somehow stating that that particular condition regarding the waiver would need to come back to the board with I would hope Don or Kyle from Public Works would be able to attend to defend their position and the reason why they did not support the waiver. The alternative to that would be to go ahead and continue the application out to the meeting in August to allow all of those things to happen in one meeting. And we could make sure that we have the availability of someone from Public Works to be here to present their side to the board directly, because I frankly am not comfortable doing that, not knowing specifically what the rationale behind the requirement or the former regulation is.
I like your suggestion. I will only expand on it to say that if the Dawn or anyone else from DPW isn't able to be here, Kyle or anyone else, that they could certainly write to us and explain their opinion in writing as to why they want to stick to it if they feel like that's sufficient. I'm sympathetic to the applicant, and I don't want to make him do things that are dumb and don't make any sense. I get what Bill's saying, that right now, if the default is this is what our regulations require and DPW says we should stick to it, if I had to vote tonight, I would stick to it. So if the applicant wants a different result, then we've got to look at opportunities to get further information that might change that viewpoint, and do that either directly by hearing the details from the DPW, or I know that peer review doesn't make a lot of sense in this, but somehow if I had to vote tonight based on what I know, our regulation requires it and DPW says keep it, it's hard not to do that. And if we want to open up the possibility that we're going to grant this waiver, it requires additional information. Other members of the board have opinions about any of the three requested reliefs that the applicants asked for? Chris and Joel, what do you think of the possibility that we grant you 2 out of the 3 and then come back and take a look at the first one with more information from DPW so that we can argue the facts rather than just saying my engineer disagrees?
Could that be done internally with just communication through DPW and staff without an actual
meeting?
Because it requires a waiver and only the board can grant that.
Okay. I want to make it clear. As much as I want to get this put behind us, believe me, I'm with you guys. I want to get this put behind us. Understand that it will be a long, drawn-out situation because I just am not going to sign up for taking on the water from Wright Avenue. And let me explain why. The pond in my property would be filled with one massive rainstorm, flooding out my entire lower level. It can't happen. I mean, the cleanup site next door was nice enough to build that big giant detention pond in the corner of the lot. All that water from Wright Ave goes right into a culvert, goes into that detention pond, goes into the ground, and prevents that pond on my site from getting flooded out. So by putting that berm up, we would now be collecting all that water and flooding up my entire site. So that's my argument. So I do appreciate you guys trying to find a solution, and I guess we can try and do that. Go on the 2 and continue that last final piece to put this behind us.
Mr. Chairman, this is Alistair Milnes. Having heard what Mr. Thompson proposed and now Mr. Ross seems to go along with it, I feel that should be the way we go today.
Before we make a decision one way or the other, if the board were to make a decision on 2 of the 3 and leave the other one, that would leave us in a needing to re-notify a butters situation. If we continue it, then you would be able to do it verbally. There would be no additional notification.
Okay.
Just want to make sure. I don't want to have you have to incur any expenses that don't need it.
Please.
Mr. Chairman, I will amend my previous comment and say, having listened just to Mr. Thompson and recognizing Mr. Ross's bank balance, which I know is very considerable, let's go it.
Let's not make those assumptions
till what are we? August
18th.
with no further notice to abutters.
So you're making a motion to continue without addressing the 2 that we could resolve tonight.
Well, I wasn't going to, but having heard Mr. Thompson's explanation that if we do it in 2 parts, we're going to have to notify abutters again, I don't want to keep doing that. Let's just bite the bullet and say, okay, let's get Dawn to tell us, or in some way to inform us of what she's worried about in regard to the rules and regulations, and we'll tackle the matter in August.
I think the board could very easily give consideration to giving a consensus on the other items so that there's a comfort level moving forward. And at least at that stage, we can phrase our memo for the next meeting appropriately.
It is only, we are basically comfortable with items 2 and 3, but not totally comfortable with item 1 until we hear from Public Works. But to make it easier and economically the lowest cost, we'll continue the whole thing, but making it quite clear that we're not looking for any further explanation on items 2 or 3.
I think that's fair, although maybe we'll phrase motions in words that don't use our comfort level as being the criteria, since that's not really how this works. But before we do that, it occurs to me we haven't solicited any public comment on these. And so let me pause for a moment to find out if there are any abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in. I see no hands up. Going once, going twice. Okay, we've done our public hearing. Then we've checked that box off. I'm not really sure that I understand why we can't grant 2 of their requested questions and then continue for consideration of the 3rd one. Tim, explain that one to me again.
Essentially, if you were to conditionally approve this with leaving the waiver question unanswered, you would basically be issuing a notice of decision with a condition still remaining. That condition requires a waiver, which would require another trip to the board, which if you were to grant conditional approval would mean an additional application for a further amendment.
Right, but it's pretty common for us to take up somebody's waivers in one meeting and then continue it and finish the rest of the approval to grant the conditional approval in the end.
But these are not asking for waivers. These are the 2 that are actually specifically amending conditions of approval.
I gotcha. All right. I'll take your word for it. I'll follow your lead. Bill, was that you?
Yeah. So here's your SAT word of the week. So nothing can be bifurcated. It's all or nothing. Correct?
You have it.
Apparently, or since there's 3 of them, we would trifurcate them.
Trifurcate them.
All right. So the one pause that I have with respect to expressing some consensus of the board is that we've got the bare minimum, or barely over the minimum number of people here for a quorum, and with other members who are not here, us expressing some consensus and knowing that we could have other attendees come next week who have a different opinion, I'm nervous about that. But I'd much rather give the applicant something concrete that they could rely on. But if we can't, then it is what it is.
I wish
with
I
that
had,
in mind,
I wish I had a solution where you could do 2 of the 3 without doing the other one.
Yep. I got you. All right. Anyway, I don't know that there'll be a different view of the other 2, even when we have other members of the board here present. And if so, I'll kick them under the table or something. With that in mind, then it is appropriate to make a motion to continue this to our next meeting for the purposes of hearing additional feedback from DPW as to the first requested amendment only.
So
vote.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second for Bill's motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Alistair Mills. I second the motion.
Excellent. If there's no further discussion, Lynn, how do you vote?
In favor.
Alistair, how do you vote?
Aye.
Sorry, Tim, you interrupted us. Did I mess it up?
You needed the actual date and no further notice.
August 18th and no further notice? That's what I heard Bill say.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, Lynn still votes in affirmative?
I do.
Alistair?
Still in the affirmative, Mr. Chairman.
Paul?
I vote aye.
Bill?
Regretfully and reluctantly, Mr. Chairman, I vote aye.
Oh boy, I vote yes. That's 5-0-0 to continue it. I would have rather had dealt with business in the first place. With respect to us continuing this, how does that affect the next agenda item, Tim?
That covers, we will not need to act on the other agenda item. That can be put on hold until final disposition of the requested amendments.
Okay. Would it benefit the applicant for us to at least read it into the record and hear if there's any feedback that they may wish to address on the second one between now and then, or should we just pause?
The second one is, what I'm talking about is their request for an extension to the approval you just talked about. We're not talking about item 8 on the agenda.
Oh, okay. All right. So with respect to the request for extension, the applicant requires an extension of our conditions of approval based on the incompletion of 3 items, which may be pulled off the table later. We ought to, in fairness to the applicant, grant such an extension. We typically do those in 6-month blocks or more, and it probably won't take a 6-month block, but what's the will of the board?
Chairman, I make a motion that we grant a 6-month extension to the applicant on this particular project.
6-month extension of the conditions of approval, second by Mr. Boyd, motion by Alistair. Lynn, how do you vote?
In favor.
Alistair, how do you vote?
Aye.
Paul, how do you vote?
Vote aye.
Bill, how do you vote?
Boyd votes aye.
I vote aye as well. That's 5-0-0 to grant a 6-month extension of the time period to complete the conditions of approval. And that does complete item 7 on our agenda. And now the question that I had further on that is, as to item number 8, is the action that we've taken so far affecting our consideration of item 8 tonight?
No.
Okay, so then let's find my agenda here and we will read item 8 into the agenda. Christopher Ross LLC is the petitioner and owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of a waiver of full site plan review for the conversion of current retail space into 12 multifamily residential units, including building additions totaling approximately 848 square feet. The parcel is located at 401 Daniel Webster Highway in the C1 Limited Commercial Aquifer Conservation and Elderly Housing Overlay Districts, tax map 43, lot 83, case number planning board 2020-14. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your packet, you'll find a memo from myself dated July 17th. The applicant was recently in front of the Zoning Board of Adjustment, received special exception to allow residential use on the property, variance to allow the proposed density of residential use of the property, and then a further encroachment into setbacks for proposed building additions. The applicant is proposing to convert the existing former commercial space in the building into 12 multifamily housing units. The applicant is requesting a waiver of full site plan review, which both Public Works and Community Development are not supportive of for the reasons detailed in the memo, particularly given the implications on several items: traffic, utilities, drainage, parking, and access that result from the change of commercial to residential. This site is going to operate quite differently with residential use, and the demands for service, utilities, and public safety are also different for multifamily than commercial use. I'm not going to go into specific detail into the rest of the recommendation until I want Chris to have an opportunity to make his case for the board before I get into the reasons why we're not supportive of the waiver.
Thank you for the introduction, Tim. Chris and Joel, introduce yourself again for the record, and then make your presentation about the change of use.
Okay, Chris Ross, 401 Daniel Webster Highway. I'm going to start out. Joel will introduce himself if and when he speaks on this. I just want to quickly rewind. A lot of the board members already know this. I'm playing a broken record. Back in 2002, I bought this building with everything I had, and I rehabbed it from ground up. I stripped it down to the frame. I invested my life savings into creating what was there back in 2002. And I introduced several retail businesses into the property, and sadly watched all that money and all that hard work get worn and torn. When you've got retail customers coming in and out every single day, they're wearing and tearing on the property. If you looked at my pictures from 2002 and you looked at it today, it's night and day. And it quite honestly, it saddens me. I don't like it. We also had another problem that has been souring me is I'm not going to show you a ton of pictures. I'm trusting that Tim has sent you guys a packet of photos showing this right here. Okay, which is the parking lot when retail is operating in that building. There are cars in every single parking space. There are cars out the driveway. They're lined up along the driveway. They're blocking entrance doors. They're sitting on Daniel Webster Highway waiting to get in. It's a nightmare. Nothing can get through. So retail really doesn't work for the site. Joel and I came up with an idea. We have been talking to our customers at Synergy for a number of years, and what they are in need of is a short-term rental while they're in transit, while they're selling their home and getting ready to move into their new home, while they're getting ready to be shipped off to another state. They're looking for a 2, 4, 6, 8-month lease on a small apartment that they can kind of put all their stuff into storage and move into temporarily, and then move on. And we looked at it. We have looked at the parking, and we found that the parking calculations on something like that would need approximately 14 spaces plus 6 spaces for us, which we're approved for, and we have 49. So we have more than enough parking for something of this caliber. Additionally, the one thing that I like more importantly is the fact that Synergy would be caring for this building. Anybody that comes into my building, I'm not going to name names, but some of you have already been in here and are still coming in here. You know how meticulous we are when it comes to the care of our building. We have full-time maintenance people in here washing walls, floors every day. And we would be plugging this building into that and putting it into a more protective state. We had wanted to get with community development to sit down and talk about this. And Tim, this is nothing personal, but between COVID and, everybody's time consumed, Tim was unable to sit in on that meeting. It was a very important meeting to me. And, it's kind of, it was basically a phone call, and the person that was involved was not the person that made this 6 pages. And when we reviewed these 6 pages, the majority of this doesn't even apply to what we're looking to do. And I don't know if we have to or how we go about it, but we almost have to go through each and every one of these line items to explain and show you how this does not even apply to us. And that's kind of where we're at. We're at a crossroads. Joel and I have a tenant, retail tenant, that wants to move into the building, main floor, take up almost the entire floor. But it's going to put back the site into this situation. Now, I know that we've got striping and some do not parking signs already planned with those changes that we made, but guess what? We all know that people are going to ignore that, and they're going to go right back to doing this right here. And Joel and I have a solution that will eliminate this parking nightmare on the site and create a more safer, better place and allow us to fix up this building back to where it was back in 2002 and put it into a more protective state, because let's face it, it is one of few historical properties left in Merrimack. When we look at the retail component, I know you guys don't care about money, but I do. We are taking a 46% hit on revenue when we go from a commercial component to a residential component. We are going to make 46% less money than if we had a retail tenant in there versus the residential. On top of that, we have to invest over $1 million into taking that barn and doing what I did back in 2002. That is stripping the exterior and the interior and putting it all back to brand new again. So from an investment standpoint, I want to share that because I want you to see that we're not doing this or asking for what we're asking for to make money. We're actually spending a ton more because a commercial tenant is just going to put back the issues that we're dealing with today, and we don't want that. We want to fix the problem. We want to put the property into a protective state. We want to make this better. So we're asking for a site plan waiver, but I just want to point out that some of these items that are on this list would be more into a conditional approval, and that's kind of what we're asking for. We're okay with talking to DPW and the water company and finding out what we need to do, and we're gonna adhere to whatever they say, but we don't want to have to spend money on a site plan, or I call it a rough draft, and come to the board and tell you what we're looking to do. It's kind of common sense. I'm looking to take the existing building. I'm looking to gut out the guts. I'm looking to build 12 small apartments for my customers. I'm not looking to make any changes on the site. None. I'm not changing the lighting. I'm not changing the site. I'm not changing the pavement. I'm not changing the drainage. Nothing. They make a notation in here just to show you a couple of them. They talk about the drainage, how we're adding impervious area to the site. No, we're not. No, we're building a small 8-foot bump out on the south end of the building, the largest, tallest section on the wall that looks like a big blank eyesore. I'm looking to wrap that enclosed farmer's porch around that south end because that's architecturally correct. And guess what? While we do that, we take all that ugly, the meters and the condensers, all that ugliness off the side, and we hide it inside. That's what we're looking to do. We're looking to make it look better. And then we take all the water that comes off that little roof and we plug it into the gutter system, into the downspouts that go right into the ground that's already there. They talk about the traffic that's going to go in and out of there. I don't even know where they got that. How do they compare this to 14 parking spaces, which is more than enough, according to regulation, to suffice 12 small apartments coming and going versus hundreds of customers a day going in and out of commercial businesses? So again, when I look at these 6 pages, 90% of this doesn't even apply or make sense to what we're looking to do. And that's where we're at. Joel can probably add some more.
All right, so Joel Sickler here, again, 403 Daniel Webster Highway. So just to, I guess, clarify a little bit of what Chris has said here, what we're looking to do is, as he said, convert that into 12, 1-bedroom apartments. So according to the regulations, you need half a space per bedroom and half a space per unit. So that's one space per apartment plus one guest space for every 10. So a total of 14 spaces is all we would need for that. So parking is, we got that way covered. But there's all these items these 6 pages of items here. Majority of these would be addressed, when the project is complete. There's going to be a final certified plot plan. All of this information will all be on there. We're not making any changes to the site. Everything stays the same. That final plot plan would address all these items. And the reason we don't want to do that now is because, as you know, this barn here is, for all we know, we believe it to be about 150 years old. Nobody seems to know for sure. But when we go to do that little bump out there on the side, we don't know what we're going to run into. So we can't really put that on the plan yet, because that 8-foot bump out might end up being 7'6", or it might be 6 feet. All depending. We don't know what's there, or what you're going to run into when you're dealing with a 150, 200-year-old barn. So what we want to do is take care of this small little addition here, get all that stuff hidden, as Chris said, out of the way, so it's not so unsightly, and then get a final plot plan that addresses all these items that that staff would like to see, which we know we would have to have anyway. Exactly. And that would be our full intention, to take care of that at that point. So the bottom line is, we're looking for some kind of assistance from the board to help us do this. And the alternative is that, if there's no, if we see that there's no willing assistance, then that means that the board is, accepts the fact that a retail business in there with the traffic issues and whatnot is fully acceptable. We don't
help us help the property. Yeah. We went to zoning, and they approved all 3 variances 5-0, no questions. They loved it. They absolutely loved it. It made a lot of sense. It's one of few historical properties in Merrimack, and you know what? It doesn't belong being commercial. That was the lesson I learned, because people come and go every day, hundreds of trips, and they're beating the crap out of the building. That's what I want to put an end to. When people live in the building, they care more about the building. And if we have it in our system at Synergy, we're going to take care of it like we take care of Synergy. So now we've got a protected building, a historical building in Merrimack. That's what I want. And then on top of that, we're solving this problem right here. No more of this. No more of this. I mean, we've got a parking waiver in place that allows me to fill this entire building up with commercial businesses. And we'll do it. I don't mind doing it. We make more money doing it, and we don't have to pay for fit up. But we're looking to invest over $1 million, rehabbing it all over again, and putting something in there that's going to eliminate the problem that we have at this site. And that's our case.
So just a final 2-sentence wrap up. All we're looking for is some kind of a conditional approval that allows us to do what we need to do, and fully expecting that we're going to have to talk to DPW and the water department, and they're going to have their input. We understand that. Fire department had a thing in there about access roads. Well, obviously there's no access roads required for this project here. So that's,
I mean, that's another example. The fire department made a comment about an access road. Where are you going to put an access road? He said, I got to have, access to all 4 sides of the building. He does have access to all 4 sides of the building. I question if the fire department even knew which property he was talking about. It doesn't even make any sense. Where are you going to put an access road? There's no place to put an access road. And you've got all 4 sides covered.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. There's some parts of this that I really like, and I want to give you some compliments on some of what you've got going on. I've always liked the way you've cared for your building. I thought it was, you thought it had a big, broad, ugly side to it. I think it's a pretty attractive use of the barn that you've had, and you've always done it. And you do take care of your property, and you do care about what it looks like. That's always been apparent to everybody here. I don't think anybody would ever argue with that. I also like the idea of figuring out ways to use properties differently as we go through. Everything in our master plan and everything in our next master plan is about the potential to redevelop properties on DW Highway. I mean, that is as focused as you can get, and to come up with mixed uses and figure out a ways to make compact development, because that's really where it's going to be from now on in Merrimack. We've got just about all of the open spaces and undeveloped lots have been used up for things, except for a handful of them. And everything that we're going to see going forward is going to be people doing exactly this, saying, here's what I got, here's what I want to do with it, I'm going to reshape this and do it a little bit different and all of that. And I love it. I think that it's great. I think there's a demand for it. There's a demand for the residential. There's a demand for compact development where you can walk to a place and cross over here and you're not that far down the road from the diner, and all of that kind of thing. Very popular, very up and coming in terms of what's needed in the place. Obviously, you got the town's departments telling us that we need to have a full site plan review. That's really the key to what you're asking for, is waiving full site plan review would relieve you from all of those things, and the town's departments are saying we shouldn't do that. And so that's the question that's before the board. When you talk about saying, well, I'll go to the fire department, I'll go to the water department, I'll go to those, none of those entities have jurisdiction on their own to require anything of you except through the planning board and through the planning board's review. So if you waive full site plan review, it's waiving all of those things. And if all of those things are going to be required of you, it has to flow through the planning board to do that, because that's the mechanism for the planning board to say, what did the fire department say? What did the police department say? What did the water department say? What's DPW say? How's the traffic going to work? How's the lights going to work, and all that? And so I'm reluctant to, want to not get all that information ahead of us for the board to look at ahead of time. I mean, that's what we do, is we pre-approve things, not look at the plan after it was over with. The one comment that I'd make about the use, and I know that you've tailored the plan to do these short-term rentals because it pairs with your other business there, Synergy. I'm not sure where the dividing line is between residential and short stay hotel kind of uses. And I know you don't have a desk like a hotel, but neither does the Springwood Suites at the other end of the property. But the town has had tremendous headaches with short stay hotels. And I don't think that the board would like to see that kind of a development continue around town. I think when you talk about people taking pride in their home and taking care of the place, that doesn't come from short stay. That comes from people who plan to be there for years and years. People that are there for a month or two or not, they don't really care whether they bang up your walls or park anywhere. So anyway, I'm not sure if I even understand whether this is a residential development or whether it's some kind of something else when you're talking about doing 1 month or 2 month leases. I don't know what, and that has to be answered by the planning and zoning administrator, who makes a decision of what this use is before we can move it forward.
Okay, can I address that point?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. So I think to answer that question, and it actually gets into a tax issue, where we just supply furnished rooms. That's a hotel scenario. It's a rooms and meals tax situation. Yep. We don't want to get involved in that. So our goal is to supply an unfurnished room. It's essentially an empty apartment. So we're not going to get a overnight or a 1 week or 2 week person coming in there. It would only be a situation where, as Chris already mentioned, you have somebody who's moving, they're in transition from one home to the next, and rather than putting all of their items in storage, they would move it into this apartment for, it's probably not going to be a month or 2 months. It probably is going to be like a 3 or 4 month minimum, I would think, in order for somebody to go through that effort. So
our research has shown 6 months on the average.
Yeah, so it's not going to be that short-term, hotel scenario, none whatsoever.
It helps to have that additional information. I'm not sure where the dividing line is. I certainly get that rooms and meals tax applies to certain entities and not others. And I don't know whether it's the fact that there's furniture there that makes the dividing line or not.
It's frankly, that in a 6 month, anything under 6 months.
Anything under 6 months and furnished. That is the dividing line.
And I'm not even sure that rooms and meals tax is necessarily what I'm after. People that are transient, that don't have any investment in the community, that only plan to be here for a short time, who have put some things in storage and aren't sure where their next landing spot is, can be the kinds of folks who put extra burdens on the police, put extra burdens on the community for, just the choices that they make in lifestyle. I don't know who your tenants are. I'm not pointing at anybody in particular and saying this guy is this or that guy's that. But we didn't expect what we got with the 2 long-term stay hotels that we have now, and they have been problems. And I want to make sure we're not going down that road again. Part of that is, understanding what the property development's all about. I would think, frankly, I think that if you said I want to rent them for year in and year out, and people can live there as long as they want to live there, there's more than enough demand to fill up 12, studio or 1-bedroom apartments. You won't have any problem keeping them full without tying it to the synergy customers that want to do it. Everywhere in town they're building apartments, and they're getting filled up as fast as they can become available. Even across the way on East Chamberlain Road with the senior development and the NeighborWorks development a little bit south of you guys, and obviously the stuff up by exit 12. And the stuff by exit 11 and stuff by the outlet mall. There's hammers swinging all over the place in town, and they're really high demand. You may end up with folks that take more pride in it if you have somebody that's willing to be there for year in and year out.
Yeah, and it's not like we're ruling that out. There might be a situation where we have a customer that's more long-term, 1 year, maybe even 2 years, but what we're trying to do is address the situation that we have with our current customers, where there is no option for them for a 3 or 4 month stay because everywhere requires a 1 month lease.
Yeah, we got 2 long-term hotels in town.
Yeah, I just want to point out, because I really don't want to be put into that classification. I would recommend contacting one of the detectives, which I'm going to leave nameless for now, but I think he would speak very highly of Synergy in the history that we've been here. With the customers that we've had coming and going in our building, we have our eyes open. We've got over 125 cameras watching every move, and anytime we've ever saw anything suspicious, we've been in touch with the PD. They will vouch for that, and they've been very accommodating and thankful for our phone calls because of what the result has ended up. I'm going to leave that alone. But nothing would be ignored with that building in the front. We'd be plugging cameras in the common areas of that building into our own system, and we'd be keeping an eye on it just like we do this building. And none of the stuff, the riffraff that you're talking about in the other buildings that don't have any security, that don't have any cameras, none of that would be happening here. And I think the PD, more specifically the detective in the back of my head, would vouch for that. So I just want that on record.
Point well stated and well taken. That's consistent with everything I know about you from the way you keep up your property. So I believe that with or without having a particular police officer who may use the Synergy or somebody that's got closer experience with the building. That is consistent with what I know about you. It does require us to sort of know and have somebody make the call as the planning and zoning administrator as to what this thing is. And if it needs to be adjusted a little bit to make sure that it's not a hotel and it's purely residential, then we can know what those details are that would have to change. On the parking question, the parking calculations that come out of the table in the formula is a starting point for these things, and the planning board can always look at them and decide whether they need more or less. With these, if you're talking about a family member who put their stuff in storage and needs a place to crash for a little bit, you're probably pretty consistently talking about a husband and wife with 2 cars. And that means that 24 spaces is more like your number rather than 14.
Yeah, and again, we understand that.
Yeah. We have over 40, so.
Yeah. But you've got those spaces. Now, some of the arguments that you make about retail and how it's parking and all of that stuff, on the one hand, I understand what you're saying, but I also have to point out to you that you asked for it. You came before us and made all these presentations to say, this is what will work for me on this site. And we're going to add the storage in the back, and we're going to add the other thing down the way. And this is what we want to do. And at each stage of that, we've always talked about parking, and you've always said this will work for me. So while I get that maybe it has been a handful,
unfortunately, I say this, it's not even the right word, but unfortunately, Merrimack Vision Care, the hair salon, the preschool, and our business have all grown. And with that comes more traffic and more parking. So back in those days, it worked. But, unfortunately, more employees are hired, more customers are coming and going, and it got full, as you saw.
Yeah, I get it, and beyond just understanding that times change, every applicant that's ever gotten approval for anything always has the right to come back and ask for approval for another thing. It's just there's nothing about getting one project approved that says you can never ever again come up with a different idea or change your mind. So you're free to do that, but I just do have to point out that when you hold up the pictures of the cars parked places, that's what you asked for.
I know. I just want to show you what we're trying to fix. That's all.
So I think ultimately the concept that you got going here is a good one, and it's workable, and it's got the right thing that you want with having, walkable development and people being able to walk down to the pharmacy that's not very far away, or walk across the way and go to the diner, DW Diner, all the things that are in those places, or other retail that's up and down DW Highway. There's a demand for that, and it'll work. And we've got to focus on how we're going to, as a planning board, support this kind of compact development. The only hang up I have as I sit here today is your request to waive full site plan review, and the town's and the department's suggestion that we shouldn't, and that we should see all these things. And then I'm thinking about, well, what are these things that are different? You're not making huge changes, but you are making changes. There's probably about 1,000 square feet of new bump outs that are on 2 on one side and 1 on the other, and they're not huge, but they do change things. The lighting works differently with residential. You've got this play area that the daycare used to use, and I suppose that could be something that's a bit of an outdoor space for the people who might be in these apartments. But we don't know that because it's not on a plan. We don't have a plan. Nobody suggested what that's going to be or what it should be. There's a sidewalk that runs along your building kind of into that play area. And if that play area is going to be some outdoor space, that sidewalk goes into a dead end inside of a fenced in area and doesn't really help people get to their cars, for example. And just understanding how all of those things work is what site plan's for. It's not simply knowing from the water department that they say, yeah, we can supply water to 12 people or to 12 apartments. That's certainly part of it, but where is it? Where is it installed on the property? Where does it connect? How big is the line? Knowing all those details is what commercial site plans, that's just the bread and butter part of reviewing a commercial site plan. And those are the kinds of things that we would be looking for if we did full site plan review. That's what the staff is telling us we should be looking for. I don't miss that it's an expense, though. I get it. Anyway, I've said enough. Let me hear from the other members of the board what their thoughts are. Anyone want to weigh in?
Mr. Chairman,
one of us put him to sleep. I don't know what Chris, was you or was it me? We knocked them all out. Alistair, what's up?
well, I've heard both sides. I've heard Chris's, and I've heard Chris's arguments for about the last 10 years, and I've heard what you did. Sorry, Chris, but you can't get away from it. I cannot walk away from the fact that we don't not do full site plan review. I don't think it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. You've got a lot of your site review. You've got a lot of the information from everything that's gone before. I cannot let you off the hook. Much as I love you dearly, I'm not going to let you off the hook. And I feel that we have to resort to what has been recommended by Mr. Thompson in his memos. That the matter is deferred for a full site plan review.
We would go commercial. Sadly, tonight's meeting was basically to gauge the planning board's willingness to help us move that forward. And in which case, we would just move forward with the commercial. We're going to be suffering with the issues that we've suffered with for years, but from a business standpoint, it does bring in more money. I'm looking to basically put the building into a protective state and rid the problem that we've been dealing with for a long time. I don't want to be dragged down this long road with site plan review and everything else for a brand new development. We're offering to spend over $1 million rehabbing this building all over again. There's no way. I with all due respect, I can't sign up for that.
But with all due respect to you, I just cannot see how we can walk away from what is normally required, and I really find it hard to believe it's going to cost you that much, because
we're not changing anything on the site. That's my problem.
Well,
everything we have a recorded site plan that shows where the water's coming in, where our curb is, where everything is. We're not changing the site of putting a small bump out on the end of the building.
But everything you've got and done in the past must give you 90% of what a site review is going to require. I am struggling to see. I mean, we've had people in the past come up with something as dramatic as you're doing, and they've been able to get a site review done almost on the back of a fag packet. And I cannot believe you can't do that with this.
Because the problem I have is I've got 6 pages here from community development where 80% of it doesn't even apply. That's what I want. I don't want to walk down that road. I don't want to walk down that road.
That's what a site plan does, is it tells us whether those things apply or whether they don't apply. And I get what you're saying, that you think you're not changing things on the site. I'm not sure that that's the correct approach. Maybe there are things that do need to be changed on the site. Ways to make sure that you're dealing with pedestrian traffic that's different for residential versus commercial. Who knows what it is? That's what site plan is all about. It's for. But if it's $1 million project to do that, doing a quality site plan should be necessary as a $1 million development.
I hear you. Again, it's this is what's making me say no way. Because we don't have to. We can basically get a tenant in there that's going to spend the money fitting it up the way that they want to, let them do what they want to do, fill up the parking lot, and it's business as usual. I basically just came to the planning board tonight to say, hey, listen, I've got a solution to this problem right here. And while I'm at it, I got a way that I can put the building into a more protective state. And I was looking for help.
Is there any kind of help that the board can offer to help us move this forward, and without going through 6 pages of
I mean, some of this stuff is unbelievable. I mean, it just doesn't even make sense. I mean, they're talking about traffic of the cars coming and going. I mean, hello, we've got a waiver of something like 30-something spaces in place right now. And we've got a solution with this new concept where we've got more than enough parking, no waiver needed. I mean, I'm afraid to walk down that road. I am. I've been down that road before, and I just don't want to go down it.
There could be occasions where you're looking at, questions of what happens with the traffic, where you're asking for waivers of that specific part of the regulation if it's appropriate. I can tell you the difference, the deal with doing commercial to residential is the traffic occurs at a different time. It occurs at a different time of the day. And coming and going at 5 p.m. on DW Highway is a lot harder than going at 2:30 in the afternoon on DW Highway. Now, you're not still, it's a small number of cars, so it still may be appropriate to not pursue a detailed amount of traffic information, but some level of review, just so that we can satisfy ourselves that we've made sure you're complying with our regulations. That's our job. That's what we're here to do. But most of the things in the 6 pages that you keep pointing out, and frankly, 6 pages was because they stopped looking for stopped going through the review process. There could have been a lot longer review, but those are the standard things that are not, they don't require an engineer to give any special attention in a site plan. Just the fact of doing a site plan as an engineer will check off 75% of those boxes, if not more, maybe even 80, 90, 100% of those boxes, just by saying an engineer has looked at it and said, here's how the drainage is going to work. Here's how the traffic's going to work. Here's how the lighting's going to work. Here's what we're going to do with pedestrians. Oh, we're going to paint a crosswalk here. And getting all of those things done so that we can, as a board, do our job, which is to say, compare what you propose with what our regulations require and know that we've done it all.
Chris, let me give you one other slight bit of help.
Yes,
When
sir.
they were developing I think it's a 55 plus development up East Chamberlain, we were presented with a beautiful traffic study, really comprehensive. The developer did a fantastic job. I suggest if you give him $5, he'll give you the information.
You don't even have to do that. It's in the public record.
Let me ask you a question, and this is just further gauging. Are you saying that the board would be looking now? Mind you, we're going from this to 12 short-term rentals, okay, where we don't even need a parking waiver. Are you saying that the board is more than likely going to request a traffic study?
No, I'm telling you one's been done recently. Go and borrow it.
I understand that. I'm just saying. So you're saying that you don't see the board requesting a traffic study, correct?
Well, I can't speak for the whole board, and you haven't made a request.
I can't tell you what the board is.
I'm just trying to gauge the logic. That's all. I mean, anybody else that looks at this and sees what we're trying to avoid by putting in this new concept would see that.
I get what you're saying, Chris. I honestly do. But what we're saying is you haven't asked for us to take a look at waiving the traffic or traffic study kind of requirements that are in our regulations. You said, forget all your regulations, waive them all. And there may be individual elements of the regulation that we don't need to know about. Maybe traffic is one of those. But some of the things in our regulations we do need to take a look at. First of all, what's the site going to look like fully developed as a residential lot? Is it the thing that's in front of us? Has an engineer designed this? Has anyone thought about where the kids go under they walk? Is there going to be a crosswalk across your driveway here? How does the sidewalk get to people where they park? How is all this going to work? And there is a little bit of an impact on drainage, not a huge one, but some. And I don't know whether that will have an impact. You got your last application, you argued, for an hour that 10 extra feet of curbing is going to be apocalyptic on your pond. And then up here, 1,000 square feet of building bumped out is not.
No, we're talking about a small little bump out. I mean, I'll eliminate the bump out. I'm just trying to make it architecturally correct. We're talking about an 8-foot depth, a little bump out, a farmer's porch on the south end of the building to make that building look the way that it's supposed to look, and plug that gutter into the existing drainage. I mean, versus taking all the water from Wright Ave, night and day.
But just as a clarification, there's two other small little additions, but those are in an area that's already paved. Yeah, concrete sidewalk. It's just a stairway enclosure and an entrance enclosure on an existing concrete pad. So that doesn't actually add to any impervious.
We're talking about 500 square feet, a little over 500 square feet of real impact.
Well, the staff's memo says, I don't know, 866 or something like
that.
That's the total. Yeah,
that's a total, but some of that is on all concrete already, so it does not count. Let me ask you this, because I would like to, as crazy as everybody I've talked to thinks I'm a nutbag for even trying to do what I'm trying to do. Do you think that it might be wise to continue this and have further discussion on this so that we have time to go through this?
I mean, it depends on what you mean by further discussion. I think that you could get your project approved, and it'll be very close to exactly what you have on your plan. It may have a little adjustment here, there, or elsewhere as we compare it to what our regulations require. And I don't think that it's going to be hugely expensive for you to do that. And so if you wanted to do that, yeah, I think that you'd achieve that. And I think it'd be a nice development because you do nice stuff. That's what you do. But at the same time, if the further discussion is you figuring out different ways to talk us out of doing full site plan review, or at least more of the site plan review, I don't know that you'll get all the way to where you want to be with that argument. I mean, I think ultimately there may be some relief that's granted in certain areas, but generally speaking, we need to know more about your site. Need to see what it's going to look like. Now, that said, hang on a second before I finish that thought. only 2 members of the 5 members of the planning board have said anything about anything. And if you've already won the other 3 over, then maybe you're home free. I don't know.
Gentlemen?
Lynn and Bill and Paul, what do you think?
I tend to go along with community development. I want to see some more. But I think Chris has a good idea as to continue this till we can get some of this.
Bill, what are your thoughts?
I really like what Mr. Ross is trying to do. But at the same token, you're changing the design of what the site was originally designed for. And because of that, I don't feel comfortable waiving full site, Mr. Ross, because you're changing the use of one particular building, and there are certain nuances and certain complexities that have been talked about that I personally feel need to be addressed at a full site. I don't think it's going to be knock them out, drag them out full site review, to be candid with you. I think a lot of these things are in place. I think in the way that I'm envisioning it, it's a matter of just maybe redotting the I's and crossing the T's. That's how I'm looking at it. I think you've got a great idea. I really do. And I think it's a wonderful use of your property. I don't want you to see you throw it away, because we're asking you to come back just to make sure that we're following a process and that certain criteria are being met. You know, as long as the criteria is being met, then I mean, from where I sit, I don't have a problem approving it. You know, and if you are going to be looking for certain waivers for certain things, I know I'm going to be taking that into consideration, especially the traffic piece. I totally forgot about what Alistair brought up regarding the project across the street. That immediately solves the problem. That would be one thing you could legitimately ask for a waiver, and I would support that. You could scratch that off your list, because that's already been dealt with at that particular. And to be honest with you, it doesn't take rocket science to know that when you're going from a delta of X to a delta of Y, you're going to have diminished. I know you're going to have diminished traffic there.
No doubt.
Again, I understand where you're coming from, but there's a process, and I'm just asking you. For me, just being one person, I'm asking you to follow the process so that we can actually get a full site, look at this, dot it, cross it, and let's be done with it. I don't feel comfortable doing a waiver. I really don't, because you are changing, to some extent, you are changing the use of the property. But I don't think the things that we're asking are insurmountable.
Paul, what are your thoughts? Thank you, Bill. Paul, what are your thoughts?
I would agree with Bill. I appreciate the development into the building, and I get that it's a historical building, and I appreciate him trying to keep it in the best condition. But I mean, I need to see something as to what it's going to look like, something to tie the plan together. Because I mean, as they've already said, a lot of this is already going to be crossed off once any kind of site plan is put together. That's just how it happens. It'll just fall into place. But I mean,
thanks, Paul. I think it is more than simply, an administrative burden just to go through a process. When you deal with, for example, you put residential next to commercial and actually industrial on the back of the lot. Those kinds of things usually have us asking, well, do we screen these things from each other? Do we put buffers in between them? And of course, I wouldn't tell you to put a buffer in the middle of a parking lot, but we haven't even thought about or talked about what's the impact of having people live next to commercial and how that's going to play together. From the neighbor's standpoint, the headache that they face is, it's easy for us to say, well, it's your tenant, and if they don't like it, they don't have to live there. But the first thing that happens is that somebody moves in with a residential and they start telling the commercial what to do. And, oh, well, they got trucks over there and they're empty their dumpster at 7 a.m. and their traffic messes with me and they won't let me walk my dog on their lot. And the residential impacts the commercial. And so there's usually some discussion about how do these things work together with some synergy. And visual screens are a part of it, but other dynamics are there. Those are just normal site plan things that have to be explained. They got to be put down on paper and say, this is how I think it's going to be. And this is why I think it's going to be okay. All right. Those are the kinds of things that I'm after.
Yeah. We appreciate the little plug there when you said you'd like to see it working together with synergy. Appreciate that.
Listen, I think what what we're gonna do is what we'll do is we're gonna sleep on this. I mean, from a financial is the wrong word, but from a business standpoint, it makes better sense for us just to go back to commercial. I would like to see my vision come forth. I think it would benefit the property. I think it would benefit the town. I think it would benefit the building. There are very few historical properties in this. I would like to.
Somebody on the phone is not muted, and we're speaking. We do have somebody with a hand up who wants to weigh in, so we'll get to that one in a second. But finish your thought. I didn't mean to cut you off.
So that being said, I think what I'd like to ask is a continuance so that we can just kind of gauge our thoughts. And I mean, like I think somebody had mentioned that, the 6 pages, when you do go through it, a lot of it just doesn't even apply. So, I would hope that the board would see that and start crossing a lot of this stuff off, and, just understand that we don't want to change the site. We're not changing the site. The lighting is remaining. I spent a boatload of money on the lighting. We're not changing the sidewalks. We're not changing the parking. It's remaining the same. We're just simply going to strip the exterior and the interior of this building, and we're going to, create a more colonial, historical look, color and all, so that when people drive by, they have that effect that they did back in 2002 and 3. So,
I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure that the conversion to residential means that you should not have any changes to the site. I mean, maybe there's some that should go into the difference between what residential needs and what commercial needs. And so I hear you that there's an approach to this that says if I'm not changing anything from the outside, then I shouldn't need site plan review. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think different uses might need different things on the outside. And for example, I don't know how I'm sure you have great lighting, but it may work differently when it's for commercial purposes versus residential. Residential lighting is dimmer, but it's still present, and it changes with different light cycles, and different areas need to be lit for different reasons and different purposes.
Can I ask a question? Does the board, and I'm really curious on this. Are we gonna, and maybe this is a question for Tim. Tim, if we move forward on something like this, would we be dealing with staff and the board, or are we gonna get thrown into peer review?
That question would really be better directed at Public Works, because it's up to them in terms of their level of confidence in dealing with the drainage analysis, because that, I think, is one of the key components from her perspective in terms of what would need to be done.
All right. Is that something maybe you could look into?
It's something we can look into, and I'm sure I can get feedback from Don, but I can tell you right now that I appreciate the comment, and I know you've talked about this 6-page memo. This was me stopping at 6 pages. If you look at your plan, Chris, if I didn't know verbally what you were doing, I would have no idea what this plan talks about and what is intended to do. There is not enough information on this plan for me to even determine what is happening here.
So that's probably why
this memo went as far as it did. And
okay. So a lot of this stuff that doesn't apply is because you didn't really.
I would not necessarily agree with you that it doesn't apply. Item G under my list is simply the list of notes that we typically see on a plan,
which we would have on a final certified plan, anyways. Though, I mean,
I agree. See what they say. The board needs in order to approve. It's. I think the cart is before the horse in terms of your anticipated approach. I completely understand where you see that there's not a lot changing here, but I think the board, frankly, has done a pretty good job of explaining why, when you make a change of use from a commercial to a residential or even commercial industrial, when you're making a classification change, there are impacts that aren't readily available and readily apparent that we would discover and work through in a full site plan review.
Right. Let me ask you, could you at least reach out to her and just get her feedback on that? Because it would help our decision.
I would anticipate, given the small amount of impervious that's being added, that it's likely that she would be comfortable handling it without peer review.
Okay.
Traffic, the reason traffic keeps coming up, you need to remember, these are completely different regulations than when you did your previous site plans. Traffic is now a specific requirement. There are actually 3 different kinds of traffic levels. This would fall under the lowest level, given the fact that you're actually seeing a reduction in traffic.
Exactly.
It's a matter of going through that process and the regulations, as Bill and others have stated, that the process is there for a reason, and we spent a lot of time and effort going through to make these regulations what they are, so that it becomes essentially the cookbook for you getting to an approval.
All right, let us ask you guys for a continuance, and if you could just reach out to DPW and gauge her thoughts on that. And I guess we're just trying. We don't want to see ourselves going into a traffic study. We don't want to see ourselves spending thousands of dollars in peer review. It just doesn't make any sense to us. I mean, it would make better sense to us just to keep it the way it is and stuff some tenant in there for 10 years. So.
Yeah, potentially so. I mean, tenants are hard to find these days, and there's a lot of development around, and the residential, that there's a high demand for that, and so that's why a lot of places are. We've probably had 3 or 4 buildings around town that were commercial that have flipped over to residential over time, because that's where the market is. I get it. There's a lot of competition for the commercial tenants right now. So maybe it makes sense to do the residential from a financial standpoint. I don't know. I mean, it's not our role to dig into your finances and your books. Not to say that I don't respect the money you spend or want to make it reasonable and affordable. We want to be as friendly as we can to you, but this is not a very simple site. It's got I don't know. You mentioned $1 million for the front building. I assume that's after it's redeveloped or refurbed, but it's worth a lot now. And the one in the back is even bigger and a more complex development. And to just sort of say, well, the board can wing it on this and just figure it out, that's putting more confidence in my level of review than I put into it. I mean, that's why I want these plans to show me where you meet the regulations and the requirements.
Before the board makes any decisions, we do have public wishing to speak. So.
Yeah, I do. It's true. We haven't opened up the public, and there is somebody on the phone with a hand up.
But are you right, Mr. Thompson? As we're not actually accepting it, do we have to have public input?
You don't have to, but I think it's good practice.
Let's do it for the sake. Go.
Yeah, it's been our practice to allow the members of the public to weigh in on something that's had this level of discussion this far, even though it hasn't been found to be complete. So with that, let's open up the floor to the public, and the phone number that ends in 858 is the one with the hand up. And so let's recognize that individual. Please introduce yourself, and you give your name and address, and then offer the board whatever you think we ought to know.
Hi, my name is Laura Benson. I live at 585 DW Highway, and I have known Chris for 20 years as a businessman and a person. I think that he has a great idea. Personally, I am in the situation where I need what he wants to do. I am selling my house and I'm transitioning. I don't have a new house to go to. I need a place to put my stuff, and I need a place to live temporarily. I think that he is going to have a higher class of people than what you originally were talking about. He has a lot of class himself, and I don't think that he's going to allow a lower class of people in there that are going to cause problems where the police are going to be called out. I know that this site is a historical site, and Merrimack is trying to keep the historical sites whenever we can, and to redo it, I think it would be wonderful. And I hope that the board would offer encouragement and hope so that Chris will continue with this and get what he wants done. I think short-term apartments is perfect in there. So I hope that you will not leave him going back to commercial and encourage this for him. And I appreciate you letting me talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for your comments and feedback for the board. It's useful for us to hear it. And I think your experience with Chris is the same as the rest of ours. He is a conscientious business person who runs a nice property. I think we just got to figure out how to do our job as a planning board and get enough information to make the decisions that we need to make. Are there any other butters who wish, or citizens who wish to weigh in? Anybody else on the phone that wishes to weigh in? I don't see any. I think Laura was the only one that's on the phone only. I think everybody else is a participant in the meeting fully. So with that, we'll close the public hearing. And Chris, if we're going to continue this, our next meeting is August 18th. And then after that, sometime in September, do you think August is sufficient?
August, yeah.
Will some member of the board put forth a motion to continue this item until August 18th with no further notice to abutters?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
That would be both acceptance and hearing.
For continuing.
And I'll second that, Mr. Boyd's motion.
Motion by Bill Boyd, second by Alistair Mills to continue both the acceptance and consideration of the application until August 18th with no further notice to abutters.
Yep.
Lynn, how do you vote if you're still with us? I know that she was having some internet problems. She may not be with us any further. Alistair, how do you vote?
I vote in favor of the motion.
Paul, how do you vote?
Vote aye.
Bill Boyd, how do you vote?
Boyd votes aye.
Bob Best votes aye. That's 4-0-0 to continue the item until our August 18th meeting. Thank you, Chris and Joel, for helping us wrestle through this.
And I want to thank the board for their patience. I know it's late, and I want to thank you for putting up with me. I get a little hot-headed sometimes. Tim, I meant no disrespect. You know how much I like you.
Take it.
It's just, my business is
my job too.
Okay. Amen, buddy. Amen. All right, guys. Have a good night, everybody. Okay.
Chris, it isn't being hot-headed. It's being passionate, and we appreciate it.
Amen.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. What did I do with my information with an agenda on it so I know what we're doing next? Here we go. I think we're up to discussion and possible action regarding other items of concern. Does any member of the board have any?
We've already handled the synergy extension. We have another extension request, letter from John LaFave from Meridian Land Services requesting an extension for the conditional approval for the Demers lot line adjustment and subdivision on 30 Thornton Road West. Staff is supportive as it's just a matter of making sure they finalize a couple of minor conditions. So I think the standard 6 months would be more than sufficient time.
Who makes a motion for a 6-month extension? Bill Boyd does. Alistair Milne seconds. Lynn is off the phone. Alistair, how do you vote?
Aye.
Paul?
Vote aye.
Bill?
Boyd votes aye.
Bob Best votes aye. 4-0-0 to grant that extension. Tim, is there another item of concern on your list?
The only other item I had was just to raise the question with the board about future meetings. I know the council has resumed in-person meetings. My preference for the time being is to remain virtual with the planning board for one particular reason. My biggest concern is simply that because of the social distancing protocols that are used in the Matthew Thornton room, if we were to have a project that has an overwhelming crowd, we would not be able to accommodate and handle the public for a meeting like that if we were to attempt having a meeting publicly in person, whereas at least through the virtual meetings, we can handle however almost, I don't think it's unlimited, but we would be able to handle the public requests through the virtual means moving forward. The other question is we've gone to a 1 meeting per month during COVID. Do we want to look into September going back to 2? I can say right now that workload wise, I don't think there's a demand to move the two meetings, but it's certainly something I think it's open for the board to discuss.
My opinion on the virtual versus in-person is, as much as I would like to get back to in-person, the limitations on the room are just too tight for us to, we would not have been able to handle the number of people that were involved in tonight's meeting all in one room at one time. We would have had people waiting out in the hallway or waiting out in their car and getting called in, and that would not be effective. And I think that as we practice this a little bit, we're getting sort of proficient with moving through the agenda and seeing plans. So for now, until there's an ability to put more people in the Matthew Thornton room, I'm in favor of through August, maybe through September, or just all we have to do is decide August right now. August would be another virtual meeting. Does anyone disagree with that in any strong way? Bill?
Just a comment. I have no problem participating virtually, but what I would suggest to you is the council this Thursday night has a public hearing as it relates to parking issues at Wildcat Falls. We are opening up the memorial room in Town Hall, and we're going to be simulcasting the town council meeting at that location as well, so that if people can't be in the main room, they could be at the other part of Town Hall being able to watch and observe and be able, if they do want to testify, they have the ability to walk from one side to the other. So I would encourage you and Tim in working with Eileen and Paul to take a close look and see how things work on Thursday. I'm not saying that it may be applicable for the planning board, but I think it may give the planning board good insight as to whether we are capable of managing that type of scenario as it relates to the certain applicants that come to provide testimony to our board. So just wanted to bring that to you and Tim's attention.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I'll check it out and I'll watch it and see what you think with that. In terms of the one meeting or two meeting a month, Tim, I'll rely on you to judge the workload. And when the workload requires it, I mean, here we are at 10:30 by the time we get done. I wouldn't have hated it if this was two hour meetings instead of one 3.5-hour meeting. But use your best judgment on workload. And if you think we need to switch back, then let's just institute that at whatever nearest opportunity there is to need it.
And we'll see how we look in August, and then we'll have a recommendation for you at the August meeting.
Sounds good. Does anyone else have any other items of concern to discuss? Thank you to Nick and Justin at the technical video connection department that's helping us handle these remote meetings. You guys have been fantastic about it. A real resource to town. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You deserve all the credit that you can get for helping us do these things. And I know that you've also done some other projects for other boards and even one I know for the Rotary Club. And thank you for all of those things. I really do appreciate it. Tim, thank you and your staff for all of the extra effort that it takes to make these things work remotely. And even just signing plans and dealing with that. Figuring out how to leave a pen on the counter where I need it to be just so I can sign something and all the rest of that. You guys have really done the best you can to be adaptable through this process. So thank you guys for that. With that, does anyone else have any items of concern? Bill, what do you got?
You have a set of minutes to approve, I think, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, we hadn't gotten that far yet, but Bill was still doing other items of concern.
Oh, sorry, Bill.
That's okay, Alistair. Tim.
Yes.
Are we going to be seeing? I know a couple of months ago you had some proposed changes regarding cell towers, ADUs, some minor housekeeping stuff. I was wondering whether or not we're going to be seeing those language changes in the near future.
The initial plan on that was to wait until we resumed in-person meetings.
Okay.
I am more than comfortable, if the board is comfortable with doing that in a virtual environment. I have no issue doing that.
Why don't we add that to one of our next meetings that has some time on it to do, because I'm fine with it in the virtual environment. I mean, if we can do our annual organizational meeting and elect a chair this way, we can look over some regulations.
A presentation on that is about 30% done. So the ordinance language is done. It's just a matter of me putting the presentation together.
Proceed at your pace. What works for you. Don't rush on our account. But if there's a meeting that's got some time in it and you've got some time to get it ready.
Based on the continuances from tonight and the one application I know that's on for August that'll be new, I would think the earliest would probably be September.
All right, sounds good. Does anyone else have any discussion items? If not, then we have the minutes of Tuesday, June 16th to consider. What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we accept the minutes of that date with no changes.
Is there a second? Can't hear anybody ringing in. I'll second it just for the purposes of moving this along. If there's no discussion, Alistair, how do you vote?
Aye.
Paul, how do you vote?
Before I vote, Mr. Chair, I remember we spoke about this once. You can vote to approve the meetings if you were absent at that meeting, correct?
Correct.
You did. Okay, then. I vote aye.
Bill, how do you vote?
I'm going to vote aye.
And I vote aye as well. 4-0-0 to approve the minutes of June 16th. There being no further business before the group, is there a motion to adjourn?
And I'm making a motion that we adjourn, Mr. Chairman, with appreciation to all those of us who took part.
Thank you for that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Go ahead. There you go, Paul. Good boy.
Second by Paul McLaughlin. It's not a debatable motion, and so all in favor, as you don't do it, all in favor. We got to go around the room again. Paul.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Alistair.
Aye.
Bob Best says aye. 4-0-0 to adjourn. Thank you all for all the work. We are adjourned. I don't have to tell you to turn your microphones off and all of that because we're about to.
Merrimack TV is committed to our community. From gavel-to-gavel coverage of town and school board meetings to updates on town services and projects, we aim to keep you connected.
Good morning. I'm Kyle Fox, Public Works Director for the town of Merrimack.
Hi, I'm Diane Trippett. I'm the town clerk tax collector for the town of Merrimack.
I'm Captain Matt Tarleton with the Merrimack, New Hampshire Police Department.
And keep the public informed of every motion.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
And many moments, so you can be confident that we're here for you. Thanks for watching. Stay connected. Follow Merrimack TV on Facebook.